turn to our executive director's report.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to in person. I'm very glad to see everyone here. Thank you very much as well to the staff who really made this night happen as seamlessly as it possibly could after 2 years of cobwebs and dusting off and those types of things. Before members leave today, please pick up your copies of the annual report, which are in both English and Spanish versions have your names on them. We have divvied them out as per your request, and please take them today if you can. If you can't, just let us know and we will make arrangements for staff members to be here in the office in order for you to pick them up at another time. But we certainly would like you to take them today if you can. There's a couple other administrative items to go through quickly. There was just reminders about the e-risk forms that you need to fill out if you are using your personal vehicle for state board business. Please make sure that you fill that information out. The financial disclosure season will be starting soon. So if you haven't, you have yet to get that information from Vega, but you will soon. So please make sure that you fill it out appropriately with in the timely manner that they've asked for. I believe you should have usually a month to 6 weeks in order to fill out the information. So there's plenty of time, and I'll do my best to provide additional information as that goes forward. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Hayward. Do you members have any questions for Mr. Hayward about the report? Great. All right, we have a full agenda tonight, so we're going to start with our student representatives. And I will now welcome our student representatives to present on their efforts and recommendations to encourage student vaccination. We have some materials in our folders about that, and I'll turn to our student reps. That's up to you.
I'm working on it.
Okay.
In front of you, you have a copy of a slideshow, but there are some extra slides on here, and there are some colors. So we'll show them in a second. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. It's also an exciting feeling, being able to see everybody face to face rather than a computerized screen. So today we want to talk about our youth vaccination initiative that we've been discussing for quite some time now. Something that we are going to launch. We do want to know that we're not specifically pressurizing students to receive the vaccination, but it's really an encouragement. Before we begin this presentation,
If you guys can speak out as much as you can, the microphone is actually down on this end. So,
This year the SAC had 2 projects in total. We were focusing on our citywide survey, and then our DC Youth Vaccination Initiative was our second focus. We wanted to get out the citywide survey first so that we could move our full attention to our DC Youth Vaccination Initiative. So these all came to be because we were noticing that there are some hesitancies to get vaccinated amongst teens, and it could be seen across all ages. But so the second slide in your packet is reasons for hesitancy, and there's something that says the 5C model. And I came across this after doing some possible thinking on what could these hesitancies be for youth that, they're just hesitant to get vaccinated. And I came across this model, which is the 5C model based on psychology. And it's 5 C's. You have confidence, complacency, constraints, collective responsibility, and foundation. All of these sum up whatever possible hesitancy that you could think of. So confidence is about trust. So how much do you trust the vaccine? How much do you trust the process of development? Do you feel confident that you could get this vaccine? feel confident that this would be safe for you. And then you have your second, which is complete. And this is it, a low risk? I'm going to be like, is there no need for this vaccine? Then we have the third constraints, and these are all barriers. So what's stopping me from getting this vaccine? Is it there is no signing? Is it the time window? Is this not for me? And then we have collective responsibility. So this one is, well, my friends get vaccinated, then why do I have to? They're already vaccinated, so I'm safe. And then we have the last one, so calculation. And this is like you're pulling up all of your equations and then you're like, oh, these are the risks, my benefits. If this is fine, then why take the risk? And you're still hesitant to take it or not. Well, not take it, but get the shot.
I just kind of want to note that because we are student representatives and we are actively out in the community in our schools, a lot of things that we are hearing from our peers. And so a lot of the biggest concern regarding vaccination is a lot of the myths and the facts that have been and other platforms. So also we can clear some of those up and maybe get a little bit more trust with a lot more accurate information than what is being presented, then maybe we'll have a better turnout. So yeah, we did list a lot of our information. Time window, location, concerns about side effects. Some people simply believe that it's a government tactic as well. Tips in us to listen to us. There's a lot and a variety of reasons as to why. Go to slide number, the third slide on your packet on second page. We listed 4 initiatives that could potentially happen that address these.
The first initiative would be initiative 1, which is that would happen now as soon as springtime. I won't go into depth for all of the initiatives right now because that will be later in the presentation. So this is just an overview of what we have so far. So initiative number 2 would be next school year, so 2022-2023 school year, and that would also be school-based. It wouldn't be like a district-wide thing. Initiative number 3, same thing. This would be the 2022-2023 school year, and this would be over town hall students. 2022-2023 school year would also be initiative number 4, and that would be like school-based vaccination sites. It's because one of the hesitancies that we noticed was the time window. So most of the school-based vaccination sites that were available this past year were after school. So it was either from 4 to 6 or from 5 to 7. And I don't think the youth would like to get out of school and then have to go somewhere else. If we're able to have them get vaccinated during the school day, that would make things a lot easier and more feasible.
So just a little more in depth. The first initiative is small and school-based. We're hoping it's kind of around the month of May because it's the 4th slide. We're kind of hoping it's around the month of May because we know that some DC seniors have to get vaccinated to go to school, and that would give them adequate time to get the first dose and the second dose, and depending when the booster as well. So around May. And this one is a little different. It's more about peer-to-peer communication. So if you look on the back, which are also, we can show in a second. We designed some shirts that say, ask me about the COVID vaccine, and it's based on the back to list reasons why you get vaccinated, so that peers could kind of start that communication. This could also be pins, stickers, things like that. It opens up communication so that peers can feel like they talk to people they already know that are in their school. And it specifically says like actions you can take to talk about the COVID vaccine. This is also looking like pamphlets and resources specific to like
students in those schools where they could get vaccinated. It also, we would provide the schools with a proposed plan of what they could do, like have a day where they give out the shirts the day before, and then everyone who can wears them or has pins or hands out flyers. And then because these things are like easy for the student to have, it doesn't have to be constrained to a certain time frame. It doesn't have to be like a single event per se, more just you wear the shirt to school, someone can ask you about why you got the vaccine, things of that nature. The following 2 slides.
So I don't have the updated ones on this.
Okay, well, if you check, if you flip to the back, it's 2 examples of shirts. Obviously, these aren't finalized. This one's black. The front says, "Ask me why I got vaccinated," and I got my COVID-19 vaccine. Check mark. On the back, it says, I know this is hard to see, but the first one's black. "I got vaccinated because ... and then DC SAP youth vaccination. And the second shirt says the same thing, but in a pretty blue color. These are just examples, nothing finalized, but we were thinking something along these lines, or circular pins that say, "Ask me why I got the vaccine."
So that's into all color suggestions.
So that's initiative 1.
And just in case you're wondering why there's like a blank space in between "I got vaccinated because that," well, that's because you would be able to write your reason why you got vaccinated. So it's another like way to start conversation between peers.
So that's initiative 1.
So right now, we are going to discuss a partnership opportunity that we have with the NICLA Challenge Internship Collaboration. And so this is an organization that partners with youth to become very active citizens in their communities. So their pathways align with all that we aspire to as representatives here. And so youth voice is ultimately empowered. And I think that is something that really, really makes us happy about this future collaboration. So what it will actually be is an intern from the NICLA Challenge. We'll partner up with the representatives over the summer to plan for the initiatives taking place over the 2022 to 2023 school year. So idealistically, we will have one student here with us so that we can kind of continue out this plan and it will be more widespread. And I think it's also, I think what's most important about it is also that we have other students coming to collaborate with us as well. And I think that's what really makes it strong and an opportunity for student membership and student leadership and just the collaboration efforts in general.
And because this is a summer internship, this would not be for the first initiative. It's for the following 3 initiatives that we're about to present.
So next up, we have initiative 2, which I really do like this idea of, and it's an in-person town hall. I really am open to hearing you guys' feedback and suggestion on this one. So this will take place during the 2022-2023 school year. So there will be multiple representatives from each school, and materials will be provided to representatives from each. Look like is having us reach out to these schools to let them know, like, hey, this is what we have going on. If your students are interested, we would like to select a few leaders, and then ultimately that's how the plan will kind of carry out. And then I also propose that we could have some sort of system where we can make sure that we are keeping track and keeping up and staying in contact with the students to know how progress is going. But this will be a town hall held during school day about COVID-19 vaccination. We will ultimately be able to reach out to our students because the town hall will be during school hours, and planning will take place over the summer along with the NICLA Challenge. So what I like most about the town hall idea is that we can have maybe possibly a health official come and join on to the Zoom call and have parents and families come on. And so this kind of ties to the hesitancies that we had discovered before, so that ultimately they will be able to get these questions answered and kind of clear up some of those myths that have been kind of stirring around in the air.
As we go on, can I just ask you to keep speaking up so that we can all make sure we can hear you? It is okay to keep your mask on if you like, but it's also okay to take them off if you want to enunciate.
Okay, so initiative 3 is a virtual town hall. So this will take place 2022-2023 school year. The SAC members and other students who signed up are welcome. This will be an informative session on the vaccine and all of its components. So like, what is the vaccine? What's in the vaccine? Which one can you take based on your age? Things like that. Also planning for what would be over the summer with the MICVA challenge. Students and families also will be able to ask questions and receive answers regarding their concerns and hesitancies that they may have. So this is a good opportunity for, if you can't make the in-person town halls, you can also do it virtually. And then, you guys want to add anything to that?
Well, you may wonder what differentiates the in-person town hall from the virtual town hall. The virtual town hall in-person will allow us to reach more students. Virtual will allow us to reach families and students. And because this isn't I want to take the vaccine, I'm 16 years old, so I will walk in and take it. This is a family. So if I want to get vaccinated, I need to ask my parents, do they agree with this? Do they know what does this vaccine have? Where are we not meeting together in the same way? So having an in-person town hall during school hours allows students to get the right information and share that with their families when they get home. Virtual town halls allows us to reach families and students at the same time. So there is no communication lost in between that, what I heard from school and when I got home. Both parents are there present at the same time. So you're both hearing the same thing. Number three or 4. Yeah. So number 4 is right below number 3 on your packets.
Okay, so initiative 4 is school on-site vaccination. So this will also take place during the 2022-2023 school year. These will take place typically during a school day. The information about the vaccine will be available first, so you get all of the knowledge on what the vaccination is once again. And then also after that, then you'll be able to determine whether or not you want to get vaccinated. And then those appointments will be made for those people who say that they would like to get vaccinated. And then the planning for this would also be over the summer with the MICVA challenge.
And for this one, the way it works is if you're under the age to which you can consent for the vaccine, you can get a parent permission slip signed. My school's done this. Or if you're over the age of consent to get the vaccine, you can just come in and get the vaccine. All right, so the fun slide. What is needed? Okay, what we are asking of you is for outreach to constituencies before and after the initiative is kicked off. We are asking to brainstorm our future initiatives before the start of the next school year. Also, we would love for you guys to advocate for the student representatives next year to continue with the initiatives. We are looking for this to hopefully continue out even after possible. I'm a senior, I will not be here, but we want this to continue. So we're gonna hold you accountable for this. Number 4, feedback is always welcome. We are always open to suggestions as students in order to improve our quality of our work and what we ultimately aspire to do. And we would love you guys' promotion on social media. As you know, we do have a student advisory committee Instagram page. It's getting there. It needs a little bit of work. And that is ultimately what we are asking of you guys. We want your help and we want you to help us get that potential reach that we know that we can reach. So from the schools, what we're ultimately going to do is ask them if they would like to participate, like the leaderships within schools after we reach out. And we've had these 4 students do the initiative for 2 days before the end of the school year. For initiative 1. Yeah, for initiative 1. I believe that there is no timeline for them wearing the gear that we are passing out, which is like also a creative thing. So if they're safe to post that they make a TikTok or like they're walking down the street and they have the shirt on, like asking about why I got vaccinated with our Instagram on the back, I think that'll be a creative way to reach people our age and get more followers. Using school to school communication to get as many participating schools as possible. I also think that is something that you guys could also help us with too, because sometimes they don't want to listen to us, but if we nag them, it can be done. Yes, promotion on social media again, and lastly, what we need from you ourselves is help with promoting the initiative, approval so that we can move forward, help leading the initiative at schools, or help find some possible people who are interested in partaking in this.
If anything that you'd like to remember from this one slide is bullet point number 3 from the board. Advocate for next year the student reps to continue this initiative. We know that all 4 of us will most likely not be able to come back, but we would love for these initiatives to come back next year over the fall, because we will be planning for them over the summer. So even though we know that COVID is maybe not predictable and it is fluctuating, it would be great. Maybe people will need another booster by that time. So it would be great if initiatives do continue for the fall.
Okay, the final slide, I know this is a lot, thank you for sticking with us, is infographics and social media. The media plan, we touched on this, so social media first off. There is an SAC Instagram account, technically. I think the last post is from like,
It's
been a while.
We're getting there.
Yeah, so we want to kind of revive those accounts, and so we want to post videos that's a collection of students. At the beginning, it says, I got the vaccine because, and students can share their reasons, short, cute videos. And we can post about, we can have digital flyers as well as physical flyers. And we want to have infographics that will be distributed to schools and to spaces where students are frequent, or where students frequent. Libraries, coffee shops, we can put them on bulletin boards. It'll have information specific for wards, and then also information that's more general. So information that's about where you can go in all of DC. It's just easier to consolidate that information sometimes by ward because there are a lot of sites. We also want to put flyers around schools that are about vaccine sites specific to wards and about why the vaccine matters and where to get information from, more information on the vaccine, especially for our schools with school-based health centers. This is a great place to have these because ideally the people that work within these school-based health centers are able to help facilitate those conversations if there are specific questions. And yes, so that's basically the gist of it, infographics and social media. I know this is a long question, but we can, or a long presentation, but we cannot take questions or comments or feedback.
I have a question.
Representative Jay?
You all are amazing, you're a better person, thank you for this. Do you know what percentage of our students are still vaccinated?
I think the answer to that is we do not, but from talking to students at my school and from what I've heard about students a lot of school, it's a big number, even if it's a small percentage.
Okay.
That's really good the answer to that.
So, I mean, then I guess the feedback there is also, this is a broad initiative. If there's any way to then focusing on finding the folks who are unvaccinated and being able to communicate these messages specifically for them rather than more broadly to the board, right? I think that'd be super helpful. And just use your limited time and resources for efficiently.
Thank you. We don't have virtual hands anymore. So just raise your hands.
So, I think I'm asked up my question. So one question. So it's mandatory for students to get a vaccine before they enter school next fall, correct?
Yeah.
I think it's 12 to 18. Yeah, it depends on.
So I'm just thinking how to, next fall, kids are gonna be vaccinated, and they're not gonna be in school, I understand. So how to connect that reality with that's when you're doing the informational stuff.
So we want to make sure that students are getting the vaccine at the
kind of understanding why they're getting it, which I think is an important thing for us. We don't want students to feel like they're getting the vaccine just because it is something they have to do, but rather they understand that they're getting the vaccine because it is something that they should be doing to protect themselves and the people around them. So that's why it's not just focused on like where and when you can get the vaccine, but also kind of general information on the vaccine and information that you can share, that people that you can talk to rather about that. And also recognize that that's for some seniors and for some, so seniors who are going to college next year need to get the vaccine and their schools might not specifically mandated, as well as we want families to feel comfortable in the fact that their children are getting vaccinated and not have it be another reason to kind of feel uncomfortable sending their students to their school.
All good, and I think to really do that as much as you can in the spring. So that's one thing I want to say. The second is, you know, in terms of handing this over to the new reps, I wonder if there could be a more formal transition. I mean, I actually think there should be a more formal transition from old board to new board, where there's a real chance to get together, talk, understand what people are getting into. That's a recommendation. But it'd be great to have a formal handoff from you guys to the next guys. Especially if a bunch of you aren't going to be here, because same rate, you don't want to lose all the knowledge and initiative that you have got. And then at the very end of this, I don't want to take more time, it's just more time. I'm curious to hear from you all, based on your conversations, what you think the obstacles have been, why people aren't getting, but I defer to all the other questions.
Comment one, I'm thrilled and I'm so happy to see you all presenting this. You all talking about it, super exciting, and it is very much needed. Comment two, I'm also thrilled that you all appreciate the power of information and making sure people understand why. And you are connecting that to opportunities for families. Because I know in my particular week, I have a bunch of people who are vaccinated, and it's both the kids and their families, and I have felt a lot of tension and empathy for mandating people who don't understand why to put something in the right. And I really want to happen. And so I'm thrilled that you all are thinking about that and are doing this before it becomes a requirement. Comment three, I'm not ready to see you all go. So I said next time.
Maybe. We'll see what happens.
Fingers crossed. I like my question. I do have a vaccine clinic in my house. So when I went to visit HC Wilson, they have a vaccine clinic. What I can't remember is if they are consistently, like they were giving out vaccines at the time, but I don't know if that's a consistent resource in school, or is that just kind of taper off? Since we were doing a lot of the big vaccine push. You all know? Or do you have vaccine clinics in your school and have seen them continue to vaccinate children?
I think at my school, the most that we've done is connect students with clinics at different schools that were being held. I know I went to go get information from the nurse at my school to see if I could make an appointment to a center and get my vaccine, like at the beginning of the school year, but they don't have like on site where you could get them. Like about some months ago, they did have a clinic there, but that was because it was like DC was like moving them around and putting them in schools. So there was one there from 4 to 6 and other times from 4 to 7, Tuesday and Thursday.
And I think I'm been talking a lot about school-based health centers because I just did a paper on it, so it's fresh on the mind. But I think this is a great time that we can utilize them as a resource because they are super discreet. Students don't have to feel like they're going out of the way. I mean, especially for something that's quick as a vaccine and there's not a long line, it can be as fast as going to the bathroom. So if they're feeling that kind of pressure from their peers, because I know and I've had conversations with students from my school that they believe in COVID and they believe in the vaccine, but they're not getting it because all their friends think it's fake, which if we had something in those schools that do have school-based health centers that could be discreet like that, that would be a great option. But again, every school doesn't have that, so we can also utilize resources like the libraries. And now that it is finally really warm outside, hopefully for a while, no more snow, we can use outdoor spaces.
question about, okay, at the beginning of the school year, everyone was aware of the virus. And that was before the variants really emerged. I get the feeling that if you're already vaccinated, that you're safe and that there isn't a big fear going on about getting COVID. And that your initiative has got to, I don't want to say put fear into anything, but it's got to make people aware of the fact that, because when you were talking about seniors, I was hearing seniors. I'm a senior, and the seniors in the city are very much aware of COVID. All right, there are people that haven't been vaccinated, they'll never get vaccinated. But the seniors in the city are very much aware of wearing their mask in places and doing things like that. But the flag has to be raised again. And this initiative could do that. So whatever it takes for us to do, we'll do. Right?
I think that's a fair point. There was a similar conversation that I was having with one of my friends as a teacher, where they were saying that there wasn't enough talk about like COVID, and it seems like the pandemic is over, but it's very much still around us. So it's not gone yet. We just don't hear as much about it as we did before. We're now hearing more about what is happening with Ukraine, and while that is important, I think there are so many things that are happening at once that we just can't focus on everything, and we decide to focus on one thing.
Oh, that's good.
I can also just say that I work with really young kids, like 3 years old, and it seems like a lot of their opinions are their parents' opinions. So I think it's really important that we have, like when we talk about the virtual town hall, we have the virtual town hall. We can maybe host multiple, we can get translations, especially in Spanish and Amharic. So we have this outreach that's there, because for our younger students, it is really not their choice to get the vaccine or not get the vaccine. It is up to their parents to take the kind of leap in faith in the vaccine and go have their students take it. So it's just important that we're reaching out, not just to students, but to their families, so that conversation can be easier to have.
And another thing, Representative O'Leary, I completely agree with you. Even as a student, like I said, we've been hearing a lot of the hesitancy that are floating around in this our school days. And so I've even actually heard students say that, oh, COVID isn't that bad. I'm not scared of COVID anymore, because when I got it, I barely felt anything. I'm good, like nothing happened to me. So why should I care? Why should I get the vaccine if I'm already not feeling bad when I retract COVID? And I think that is something that is a narrative that we are going to have to work to try to reshape.
Oh, and just one more thing to add on. We don't necessarily want to scare people into getting the vaccination, because we just want people to be aware of truly what is happening on this planet. But it's just more of, we want them to be informed. We want people to know that even though you're a student, you should definitely tell your parents, hey, I definitely think I should get the vaccine. I want to make sure that I'm safe, but also people around me are safe as well.
And I'm sorry, I know Representative your question, but especially for DC students of color, we understand historically there is reasons to mistrust vaccines. So we want to make sure that we're not approaching any virtual or in-person town halls or anything with kind of the idea that everybody believes vaccines are safe, because we know that's not true. Or everybody believes that vaccines, that the government wants us to get vaccinated for good reasons. So we just want to make sure that that's also a focus moving forward, especially with our virtual and in-person towns. Representative.
So I'm thinking, just all the mess. I'm thinking that this idea you can throw it away or keep it up for elements that make sense for you. Almost like peer health ambassadors, and this vaccination piece being the initial campaign for peer health ambassadors. But they're also equipped to talk about other things like, mental health, or reproductive health, or other things, similar to like what you're saying, Bernadette, about sometimes I feel more comfortable talking to my peers. It's like, oh, maybe I'll come to you to talk about mental health, but y'all feel like, oh, did you get vaccinated yet too? Or vice versa, you talk to, like, I found a peer and I'm like, hey, today I know you're vaccinated, or I know I talked to you about mental health, like, you should catch up on vaccination, something like that. Because just like some longevity in it. Because I know COVID's gonna be a while, but then also kind of having these peers where you're talking about a variety of like just health initiatives. It's also good practice, I think, too, for people who might be interested in health careers or counseling careers. It just kind of maybe could possibly keep things fresh, because I don't know how, I know COVID's gonna stay around, but like one of the lawyers saying, it's a lot of fluctuations in when COVID is a thing, when COVID is not a thing, or when the mandates are gonna come. Last thing I promise. But vaccination, also for the freedom ambassadors, vaccination in Toronto is something for Ward 8 is, it's the thing, like the rates for vaccination in general, were pre-COVID, where they were supposed to be, and there's students who are still in school who aren't fully vaccinated for other things. So I'm just wondering, like, if we can almost create like peer roles and vaccinations be a part of it, and then other, other health initiatives also be trained in. And then also have the cute shirts where they can, just kind of be up here that like someone feels comfortable talking to about just a variety of health issues. So I just want to throw that to you and see if you're, I don't know.
That's a great idea. I think that's like just an extension of what we were thinking with everybody having cute shirts. But like it could also be one day on a Saturday or a Sunday to a meeting, probably Saturday, and kind of learn about different things that their role would be, get some information, get service hours for it, and then they could take on that role as a student health ambassador, health ambassador, in cute shirts. and funds.
Yeah, so I'm a huge fan of the Cute Shirts and Bugs initiative. I want to thank you all for the wonderful presentation. Since Representative Chang has, I pulled up the latest data from coronavirus.dc.gov about vaccinations. And so mostly I want to affirm that your initiative 1 that you're starting on now is going to be a really powerful opportunity to push some of the folks who may have this mandate staring down at them for next school year, but who need that information and outreach that you all, I think, are describing the way you want to provide it in a really warm way. You want to provide folks with information, you want to make sure that folks' concerns are addressed, and you don't want folks to feel like this is being thrown at them or pushed on them. And I think that's hugely powerful. So 12 to 15-year-olds, 66% are fully vaccinated and 17 are partly vaccinated, and that's as of 2 weeks ago. So there's a huge opportunity for you all still, I think, to have that powerful impact even with your first initiative. And then I loved your conversation around the family piece, because I think too, I'm an older sister. I like to think that my brother looked up to me when he was a kid. He's 8 years younger than I am. So I was in high school when he was in elementary school. But our rates of vaccination for 5 to 11-year-olds are even lower. Right now it says 29% of 5 to 11-year-olds are fully vaccinated. So that town hall feels hugely powerful as a way for students and families to hear information together. And maybe for older students to be able to say, listen, we learned this thing at school today. I want us to join in on the town hall so that as you're thinking about whether to do this for my younger sister or my younger brother, you've got the information. And I can answer questions that I heard answers to at the town hall as we listen to this together. So I'm super excited. I am excited to take on the responsibilities you outlined for us here. So I know we'll all look specifically for marching orders on proper outreach to constituencies. Is there anything else that would be good for us to hear from you before we let you come back to you?
I think Representative Guswin had a question.
Oh, great.
Yeah. One last one. I know we appreciate the time.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I know you have ideas about recruiting students or representatives in schools. So I can imagine, for the schools where you have a SAC student, that makes sense. How about for the schools that don't? And is that something, like, should there be communication between you all and the representatives boards so that we can help with that outreach, or do you feel like you have that down?
So I think with the survey, we learned that we need to get better at communicating with different schools because a lot of our answers are concentrated to just a few schools. And so I think ideally what would happen is this outreach happens as soon as possible, like as soon as we can finalize getting shirts or buttons or pins, we reach out. And I think what ultimately would happen is if we wanted to do the Peer Health Ambassador program, that would start next year. And this would be kind of the initiative that almost launches it. Because planning something like that takes a lot longer than we have time for in a school year. And that we would probably just need to work with every representative for the respective boards to kind of not only help us with outreach, because I think that it would be great if students would be reaching out, but just figuring out who we can talk to.
Yeah, and I guess I was wondering with the town halls, are you going to have like health experts, speakers? And so like I've had a few in my work, and there have been some who have been really great, like physicians and physician of color who speak directly to the issue you were talking about, of like understanding there's reason for mistrust and here's why, you know, we should do it, or like why, you know, it's important anyway. So I don't know, that's.
So we can communicate with representatives to see if they have.
Yeah. And then finally, I just want to say, I think, I don't know if you mentioned this or not, so sorry if you did, just like why, I know there's a variety of reasons why students aren't getting the vaccination. For, I guess for the ones with what was the C, complacency, the ones who are just like, yes. And you need like motivation. I will say we have 2 really successful pop-up clinics in Columbia Heights for families. And what we did was we thought about like what draws families. So we had, it was around Christmas time, the first one, toys, books, and groceries. And then we had folks there from BRIA, Public Charter School, which is an adult ed charter school, there to talk to folks about, and Mary Center. So folks were lining up for the various things they could get. And then the folks from BRIA and Howard University Health Clinic were speaking to folks in line, just saying, hey, have you gotten vaccinated? If not, like how come? And just like having conversations with them. We had 85 folks vaccinated in 3 hours. Oh, and by the way, we had a clinic. Yeah, so so you have like all of that at once. And I don't know if there's like things that would draw students in particular, but that drew families and their children. So it was just super successful. The second one wasn't as much. And I think it's because it wasn't around the holidays. So that's another thing to think about, if there are like days that actually bring people together anyway. So anyway, those were just thoughts that I had. Okay.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of our student reps for their presentation and all the work to support vaccination efforts for young people around the district. We are excited to support your next steps. We're also going to add you all to the discussion of what we're in the budget later to make sure that there's a need for budget for these new t-shirts and buttons, that we get that included in our discussion later on. I am now going to shift us to discussion of our equity audit, and we'll welcome Dr. Dan Fletcher to present a proposed equity audit related to the social studies standards. Turning to you, Dr. Fletcher.
Thank you. I really don't want to follow that.
It's always hard to follow the students.
And second, should I go up there?
I would actually prefer you didn't.
Yeah, I prefer that. Okay, great. Go here.
Yes.
So first of all, I am very excited to share the equity audit with you, especially right before you all start planning your plans and all the projects that will be involved with them. The next few slides will go into just restating what the equity statement and framework is, and what the plan is for the equity audit, and exactly it is and what the purpose of it is. While I'm going through this slide, it would be very helpful for all of you as members first to think of any questions you might have, any ideas you might have as we go. An equity audit is not meant for one person to do, it's for a collective body to think through. And at the end of the presentation, I love to hear those thoughts. So moving to the next slide. Thinking about the equity statement and framework, it was adopted in late 2020. It provided a time in February and protocols for evaluating, filtering policies, proposals, and decision making. The equity audit will be an extension of the equity. And so it will be a practical tool for planning projects that you may hear today, as well as reflecting on the outcomes of those projects. Next slide, please. And so going back and just reading through the framework. This next slide shows where this equity audit tool will be aligned with the framework. As you can see, those three focus areas of the equity statement and framework were to improve learning and academic outcomes for students, to increase the representation of groups that have been historically marginalized, and 3, expand access to culturally relevant pedagogy within DC schools and anti-racist professional development opportunities. And so as you can tell, as we're going to get into it, this equity audit tool is going to really hone in on that second point, which is increasing representation of groups that have been historically marginalized. So moving on to the next slide, not only is the equity audit tool aligned with the focus areas, but at the very end, if you'll notice on the framework, there's 5 ways that are offered on how to use the framework. 3 that I have identified as aligning with equity audit tool are equity discussions and learning, 4, representation and communication, and state board research. So moving on to the next slide are the purpose and goals of this project. And just very quickly to level set, an equity audit, if you're not familiar with them, it's just to study the fairness of an institution's programs, policies, and processes, especially as they relate to how they directly or indirectly impact students or other stakeholders based on their race, ethnicity, gender, language, disability, any sociocultural factors. It's an audit of how it impacts stakeholders. And so the purpose of this equity audit, it's not a broad audit of the entire state board. This is going to be very narrow in scope. It's going to just focus on the social studies standards revision process. And so it's going to examine the extent to which equitable practices were followed throughout the entire social studies standards revision process, from the planning at the very beginning in 2019, all the way to the vote in July. So there will be 3 goals for this equity audit. The first is to build the equity audit tool. The second is to publish a case study. And the third is to share the results. Not just with the state board, but I'm thinking other state boards from other states, as well as other organizations within DC and abroad. So just focusing on the first 2, because those are, I think, the most important. Building an equity audit tool. This will just build out a checklist of what equitable practices and policies should look like. And part of that process is not just, again, not just building this out or having a vendor help build this out. You're getting input from state board members as well as staff, policy fellows, and whoever is directly involved with that process. The second, publishing a case study will inform the policies and practices and ultimately organizational improvements for future projects. You'll hear projects tonight during the work plan. This case study will help inform those future projects. So moving on to the next slide, key audit questions. What will guide this work? There are 3 key questions that I point out that I'd like for all of you to think through. If you have any other questions that you would like this case study to answer, please write those down. If you have any feedback, please write those down. But the first, the 3 that I have are to what extent were equitable practices explicitly built into each of the standard revision processes. So during execution of the plan, how much of that was present or absent? And then thirdly, to what extent do members and staff's experiences differ from one another? This is something that I'm kind of interested to see, like if there are any differences. So the first 2 really get at the heart of the social studies standards provision. Next slide, please. This just goes through the different phases. Those research questions that I asked, especially the first 2, practices built into the plan and whether those were executed or not, it's going to be broken down into the 5 different phases of the social studies standards revisions, going from the brainstorming of it in 2019, planning, establishing guiding principles, the revisions, which we're talking about right now, and the improvement process. State board members voting on it. Next slide, please. So this will be the timeline for the equity audit. This April and May, the equity audit tool will be developed by staff, but also with input from members. In June, members and SAC and staff will review and provide feedback on a draft equity audit. So what is that checklist? Does it make sense to you all? And then in July, following the vote and the completion of the project, data collection will start. It's a data collection will look like surveys going to members and to staff, asking you those items on the checklist, but getting anonymous answers. So that's explaining the survey. Or it could look like an interview of interviews, focus groups, something where there's a back and forth. So that would also be built into the plan. And then lastly, in September 2022 and beyond, the equity case study is published, presented, and shared out with EC residents, publicly shared out, and also shared out with other state boards to help with their work. And so moving on to the next slide, or the last slide, before I get into the questions from all of you, I just wanted to reiterate the three outcomes of this project. We're going to be developing a novel equity audit tool. So further projects could also do an equity audit, but it was already broken out. So develop an equity audit tool. 2, publish a case study. And then 3, critically examine the social studies standards. Now, questions or thoughts on this?
I have a question. About sharing it out, would it be possible for just like get to share it with teachers of your programs? Because I know that the last building had a lot of graduates and participants in programs that shared explicitly on culture development pedagogy is. Not gonna be what the results of social studies are for, but how we walk those.
Okay, and just before I answer, I think it's not true. So let me just sharing it out with future practice programs.
Sorry, guys, do you want to go again?
Yeah.
I was just suggesting that if you said this, I apologize, sharing it with teacher preparatory programs, because I know at the last public meeting, a lot of the graduates and participants in these programs mentioned how important culture development pedagogy is, and so I think sharing not only what the standards are needed, what the standards are, but how we got to that point would be good for teacher preparatory programs who are attempting to maybe change the way they teach teachers.
Yes, absolutely. I think part of the planning process, especially when we get time, when it comes time to present this one, is to get feedback on how to share it out. It's like who to share it out with. Because this will take a lot of time and resources to build out. And this is sort of trailblazing in a way of, or like pioneering this. And I think I know that other state boards would benefit from us sharing out the process, how to do that. I also think part of that alignment piece of the equity framework is this is part of the research that the state board could do into something like an equity audit. We're doing the research not just for the state board, but
I'll make sure to bring that up again. When
absolutely, I'm making another.
So my question is, with the social studies standard phases, is that something that you, looking back, kind of said, all right, here's broke down into property, or is that something that already, like the social studies standards?
Yeah, we had a working group.
The working group identified as important. Like that, is this your breakdown of how the work happened, or is that something the working group identified when they were planning?
So I maybe that's a huge, this is sort of an a priori kind of thing, where it's like the equity audit wasn't built into this, but I thought it made the most sense to approach this using the different phases, kind of like break it out, and then point to that and say, okay, during the planning phase, this, and this happened. During voting, this is what members thought about when they were voting on this.
Yes.
You want to speak?
Yeah, so I think if I understand correctly, you're asking like where did phrases come from? So the answer is twofold. One, we did break down a little bit into phases in our original work plan, where we actually lined up like different categories, because I'm a little obsessive in my project plan about like this is what we're doing here, and then this is what we're doing next. But this is actually taken from a table in the DASB standard article that Alex, Ju, and I co-wrote. We made a table and listed out these different phases. So everything is, I think that the dates may be a little different for the approval phase because, as you all know, we are still in a moving target. But the phases are from the NASB article.
I just want to tap back. Real standards for us. And I'm curious, like, if part of your equity audit was looking at, I'm thinking to look at what happened. But like, as part of the approach is also like equity in the process. We have to be clear about like what our processes are and how we are actually moving targets for people we're interacting with. So I would be curious to know what work will from this process that we can have to look for. Not be just.
And I think that's really helpful because in the report, in the case study, there will be a recommendation section. And so maybe that recommendation would be to systemically build that into the planning of projects and start with the end in mind. if we do an equity audit, like, are we gonna check off like people like?
What provides an opportunity.
So playing off that, I like that a lot. Darren, I wonder if we might think about, I don't know if it's appropriate to bring it into the questions, but the notion of like equity in the process and then recommendations that specifically might address changes to processes to increase equity in future board work. So for instance, like, you know, if we learn that some aspect of this process was more or less equitable, or welcoming certain folks, or more thoughtful in the way that it was constructed, and others were less so, it would be helpful to have that as something we look at in the case study.
So I spent, well, actually, number 2 is include our question. Our practices. Are there equitable practices? So how are those?
That's all. So I think in April and May, we really just get down, breaking up, like looking at the basics, but then looking at 2 things. That's what the research project asked. The first would be for equitable practices built into those 5 phases of the source of data. So for example, thinking about this is building, exploring like how to put that group together, what equitable practices were built into the plan. And then once they executed that plan, that's research question 2. What's their follow-up? Did they actually use what was built in? Was there efficacy?
Because I get that. But I guess I'm wondering by what criteria, like what are the practices? And I see that some like what is the process of making your own?
So I think it'll be like what I envision it as, but I mean, this is still like being thought, but I've reached out to a few experts in equity audits on what that might look like. So for example, a checklist of things. So using the CISAC as an example, what did the outreach look like? So that's one like checkbox of like, how were people reached out to? That's one. 2 would be how were they chosen? Who was involved with the choosing of those folks? Using these different criteria, using a framework to think through like what is that? What does equitable practices look like? Just thinking through the subtasks of each of those stages. I think that's an appropriate approach to it. But again, in building this out, I'll certainly reach out to members to get your thoughts as well.
So Emily, my understanding of it, and Darren and I got a chance to meet with folks from the Equity Lab in DC. You know, a couple of years ago, I did the CA Disruption Fellowship. And so I reached out to Michelle Molitor, who runs that, to ask her if she would meet with us and talk about her expertise in equity audits and who she might recommend that we reach out to and consider working with. And she gave us some names. But one of the things I think is helpful is using our own equity framework. Like we adopted in the last year this equity framework and equity statement. And part of it is, are we living up to the things we said we were going to do and we were going to? So I think that's, to me, one of the really important criteria is, did we do these things? Did we live out this in the work? And then using the expert outside folks to help also inform, like, are there specific ways we might build out our own framework further to be able to check this in future projects and future work, to like hold ourselves accountable for, we said we care about this, did we live our values?
I think that goes to Eddie Rose's question too, of just like, once we have this tool, then other projects can be broken. It's another way of thinking for the design of the project.
Other questions? Staff question?
There's 3 here, did you say these are the 3 that we're focusing on, or there's more, or these are just different?
So these are the 3 I came up with, but I certainly would want to get feedback from them, from all of you on if you have your own research questions, if you tweak or change any of the ones that I have here. Anything that I might be missing. And that's, I guess that's like a major theme of these equity audits, is that's not meant for one person to do. So anything that I might be missing on the web, certainly let me know in the coming days. I'm thinking of sending an email out, just summarizing this, but also asking for feedback on this. And on the last slide, I know some of you have or on your printouts of this, but I can also email this out to you. Additional resources, I should attach other links to places where you can learn more about equity audits themselves. You know, like one of these 11. But I have the state for equity statement framework, and an NASB article on the development of social standards. As well as offices that I've reached out to. So Office of Racial Equity, they actually do equity audits of different agencies within the district. So I'm in touch with them to work out where we're doing. And so they'll provide feedback on that. DCPS equity strategy company, they do like equity audits. And then the last thing they are a type of vendor that do extra equity audits. I mean, they take a checklist.
Dr. Fleischer, I love this. Thank you for taking this one. Two suggestions, or do you want them now, or should I follow up?
No. If you could.
Yeah, 2 quick recommendations for questions. I think these are the right questions. If I could add, one would be like, what is the intended outcome, equitable outcome from the work? In this case, the standards. And so in that, like, understanding that an intention could be different than actual outcome. And so that might be more of a reflective question at the end of the process to say, did we meet our target? And then secondly, just like areas of improvement moving forward. So if we were to do this again, revising standards, what might we improve to make the process and the outcome more equitable? And the questions you have here, I think, are good.
Yes, yeah. I'm gonna think through those.
Yeah.
And follow up with
Yeah, no worries.
Just because it sounds like different people are, I mean, maybe there should be another question or a sub-question that is, what if any practices should be added that weren't there? So we start to like, this is what we should be doing.
And is the idea, I may have missed this, sorry. Is the idea that we would do this type of audit after every standard revision or after every major task of the board, or as requested?
I think that's a question that, again, when we get closer and closer to the publishing of the case study and presenting that report, I think that would be a great question to come back to. Because again, I mentioned maybe it is kind of resource and time intensive, but to fill out this first one. I think as I learn more about this process, maybe it could be something that could be embedded with every like major project. And I'd love to like get all of your thoughts on that as we get closer to the project. Because I'm excited. I've never done an equity audit, but I feel like I'm excited and a little nervous, but I'm like meeting just a lot of great experts in this, and I've seen examples of finished products, and so I think it's a major benefit. I also think it's at the top of this, this is aligned with the equity framework. I think it is a good piece of that or a component of the framework, and it's a tool of the framework.
I can actually give you some credit, Representative Parker, that you really pushed this work for our board for several years, that we spend more time focusing on equity, that we focus in on how do we as a board define it, and then how do we live it. And I think doing this kind of evaluation of our own work will help us to continuously improve upon how we live out equity.
We're in the living phase.
Exactly.
It's also a great question. I think my approach to this take a stab and maybe an exhaustive list of what happened, like what the plan was. And feedback from members. And just checking it. It's not if I miss it. I know I'm gonna miss things. And so what does that look like? And how I think using the equity statement and framework as sort of a base for how it's divided, what equitable practices. But that is a really question. I think it's something that I will also bring up in an email to everyone. Of just like, do I have this right? And if not, what are your thoughts? Yeah, it's like versus outcomes. Like I think it's just something that is really well planned out and work right and talk to experts as well.
I would say, great question. I think anchoring around the statement framework makes sense in the short term and the long term. I've been a part of another organization. It was a multi-year process to identify like equity standards that you could do exactly what you're talking about, like judge against those very specific granular expectations. But that would probably take us a bit of time to develop as a board.
One comment, I think there's a real value talking about this as a tool or review or whatever that is specifically for the standards development process as opposed to revenue. That's a very specific process and it's one that we hopefully are going to have a lot of confidence with. So I'm sure that whatever we do out of this can be one of the other things, but I would really be very clear about it. And this response to something that you said that we might use this for any number of projects. And we might not the real important thing that would be.
Got it. And you know what? If I could take that further, for projects that don't take on use an equity tool or an equity audit, the recommendations from this project say these are the things that might have been overlooked. Like this is what was present and this was what was not. So it would inform every project sort of have that, right? Whether or not there's an audit.
Yeah, I think I appreciate that, Representative Blackburn, the notion that there'll be very specific things that we learn from this that may be applicable to any of the standards divisions, which is something, Representative Bernstein's working on with the Education Standards Committee. But I hope that we get out our values in this equity framework that help us continue to develop, to Representative Parker's point. Maybe we don't get so far as an exhaustive list of standards, but we take the next step forward into codifying what it looks like for major initiatives of the board, whether it be recommendations on accountability frameworks or recommendations on governance, that they should include elements of this set of equitable practices and how we, for instance, for me, like public engagement. What does public engagement look like? How is that living out equitable practices? Communications, how are those linked to equitable practices? And I think that even as we learn things that are specific to the standards, there may be some things that we can count as touchstones for all sorts of work, family engagement work, et cetera.
And again, going back to the questions themselves, questions themselves, but I'm very interested in with any policy decisions or anything like that, is how it's built, but also how it's executed. Because it's always nice to say these things, but to actually implement it and do it is something completely different. And so delineating that in a report of just like, this is an autopsy. I like the word autopsy that equitable equities, but like, this is what happened with the social studies standard provisions. This is what was said that was going to be done. Was there follow through with that? Right. That was really fun.
Are there any other questions? Thank you for all the work to get Representative Patterson up on the camera with us. Representative Patterson, before we close out this section, are any questions from you for Dr. Fleischer about the equity audit?
Not at this time, because I missed part of it. I did get the first part of it, but I'll ask questions later.
So you're speaking, I cannot hear you.
I'm sorry. I said I'll ask questions. I didn't get the whole thing, so I'll ask questions.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead. I'm sorry, I still ask questions, but okay, I'm seeing that I think we're okay to move along. Excellent, great. Thank you, Dr. Fleischer. We appreciate you taking the time to help the board evaluate our work through an equity lens, and we all look forward to more information to come on this project and to continuing this sort of iteration of questions. I think the exciting part of this is also the nerve-wracking part of this, which is it's going to be an iterative process, and so we'll need to be in touch on it. All right, we get to the very exciting part of tonight's meeting. We are going to discuss our budget and our work plan. Yay! I'm going to talk us through how I'd like us to approach it. Then I also want to just remind folks that as we are speaking, speak loudly, use your teacher voice or your standing on stage voice or whatever your loud, proud voice is, so that folks who are listening in at home can hear us on the live stream and that we can make sure this is all captured for the record. So you have before you copies of the work plans for each of our standing committees and the list of budget requests to support committee work. In discussions tonight, it sounds like we may have a few more budget items that folks are going to raise. Specifically, our student reps mentioned some materials like the t-shirts and the buttons that would be helpful to their work. And we're learning tonight that perhaps we might need some camera upgrades or some microphone upgrades to continue in this hybrid posture. So we'll talk through a few additional items that may come to light. We're going to spend this next portion of the meeting really dedicated to a robust discussion. And as an important note of context for that discussion, we have on our papers approximately $120,000 worth of funding requests. If we add in some t-shirts and buttons and some new microphones and cameras, we're up to like 125,000, maybe 126,000. We have $35,000 to work with. Keep that in mind that we are beginning with a champagne budget, and we're going to end with something much more small that we can actually spend that money on in FY22. So we may want to think about, as we discussed tonight, what we'll prioritize during the remainder of FY22, that's between now and the end of September, and what we may need to revisit and schedule out once we have our FY23 budget in hand. So this isn't about what gets done and what doesn't get done, but it may be about sequencing and timing. It may also be about opportunities to combine efforts that may involve some cost savings. So as we discussed tonight, keep those things in mind and raise any constructive ideas you have for how we might do that.
Is the 35 that we have, that you're saying that's the money that's in the FY22 money that we have?
Right, that's what we have on hand right now is roughly 35,000. We may be able to spend a little bit more than that, but if we work with the number 35, we are likely to stay safe and be able to spend all of it. So here's how I think we should begin. We'll begin with a brief presentation by each committee chair of their work plan, their budget requests. We'll ask folks to stick to a 5-minute time frame for that presentation. After each committee, we'll have 5 minutes total of clarifying questions. So if any member wants to ask some clarifying questions, dig in on that committee's work, we'll do that. I'll recognize committees in the same order as we're doing committee reports. So admin committees can be up first, and we'll go through the list in the same way. In this case, I'll come back to the SAC at the end. Is that okay? Great. Once we've heard from all the committees and asked our clarifying questions, we'll open the floor and we'll have 10-minute rounds of discussion, pausing at the end of each 10-minute round to see if we need to keep talking. And if there are folks who haven't spoken up, we may want to give some more floor time to. I don't want to go person by person because I want this to actually be a discussion. So we'll try to do that and keep this whole part of the meeting to no more than 90 minutes so that we can be concluding this discussion by 8 o'clock. Any questions on that approach? Okay, great. Then we'll go ahead and get started with committee chairs presenting their overview of the work plan and budget. I'm excited. We have a timer. I thought that was going to be my job. Perfect. Turning to admin committee, Vice President Thompson.
This is probably of all the work that today, so I think as you know, the admin committee so supports the overall of the board. We only have one budget request, which is Aaron has already given an overview or gotten some questions about that. So I won't belabor as there's nothing really happening because Dr. Fleisch is an expert. So our request, and I should point out, we do have a document from the public meeting as a printout that outlines all the budget requests in one page, so whoever on our staff did this is amazing. So just go all the way to the back of the long paper. So we are at the bottom, and actually are anticipating building out this every other two in the hiring of a consultant to this to be about 10 to 25,000. I'm also anticipating some of that needs to be out the calendar year, not necessarily just one. Is that correct? Well, we would have to get something from.
So the way contracting is working, that the project would also.
Any clarifying questions for Vice President Thompson? Great. Then we will come next to accountability and assessments. Restart our timer for 5 minutes. Okay.
So we are asking for funding to do a research study on all-round education, and for those of you who are on the board, this is something we started before COVID, and it was interrupted. So this would be
But the idea was really to make pulse, it would be a small thing. So what we might do, and I think this is what we were going to do, it was do a sampling, say, of schools in 3, and word 4, and word 8. Just throwing that out. To sort of see different words, there's differences between schools, or between words in terms of and the amount of time I spent on that. So there's an equity. There's a clear difference between what they say. And then also just trying to get a sense across the city of like, is there an overemphasis on testing something like they're actually right. Education that they deserve. So that now is here, that's something that came out of 2000, probably in consultation. So that would probably take place then after this. And then the other is just for engagement. And that we're still figuring out is the joint, the rest of the board. So I think we have but that's sort of to what we actually need funding for. I don't know. Yes, that would be more engagement around input on the response to our. I think that's it. Since we're doing questions, yeah, we can be clarifying questions now. So 5 more minutes back up on the timer. Can I start us off with some Hopper?
Well, I'm just gonna add a little context to it, which is, for me, part of what we're always trying to figure out as a board is how to really advocate, how to be the independent voice for the city. That's always sort of it's a puzzle, it's a trick, it's something that we're always trying to figure out. One of the things that we've been successful at is using, for example, the teacher turnover report to really draw attention to what the city issue was, and we were through that research able to put that idea on the city agenda. Now people pay attention to wasn't true 5 years ago. So the idea of this initially going back to years, as I said, we started this in the pandemic. Was this is an issue that we hear from all over the place? Is what happened to social studies, what happened to science, what happened to the arts? People are so focused on the subject. And so this was a way, one, to establish the extent to which that's a reality, and 2, start to use it as a way to advocate, because that's been an issue that has really brought the board together. Advocate for better messages.
I have a question about just how the estimate was arrived at for the research study.
Yeah, like I said, I think that was not something that the chairs figured out. We talked through the project itself. So I guess I would turn to like or
Sure, thank you for that. So we have a document of just spending items, and so I just looked at that and maybe an estimate around based on this project. So that's how
Different, right, that's not.
Okay, thank you. Other clarifying questions?
Sorry. I'm just curious how you're thinking about how much of that informational.
for the engagement sessions. Yeah, I think we are like now. I mean, or maybe that's not
I found it helpful and inspiring the last time we talked about this, that the aim was to bring in and engage folks who don't usually feedback on these issues. And I think our assumption is that one of the barriers to engage is also not fully understanding the process or where we are and where we're going. Right? So just making sure that we don't assume that the folks who are have other sources to answer their questions.
Right, yeah, so that would be.
Build on that question. So I know we talked through the budget items, but I'm looking to see what the work plan. I just want to make sure I understood correctly that the 2022 engagement sessions look to be mostly in FY23 on your work plan. Does that still feel right? Because I look at community engagement and it starts in, there's prepared talking points in August, but it looks like the fall engagement sessions look to be September 2022, October 2022, November 2022.
Yeah, I think when we talked through this, we came up with this date because we were thinking which other dates.
Okay.
And that's when that would be like fall engagement.
Okay.
But in terms of around work, yeah, so this would be more related to
okay.
And then it doesn't look like we have any schedule for input related to the framework.
Okay.
But I was gonna say, I know some of the, and I don't have a question. I think it's probably not helpful to add in like first, at least not use that as an example. Since they're already given an overview, so I started from a budget perspective. I think what we were supposed to do was to give an overview of and incorporate budget discussion. So this is my goal. But I realize some of the questions that are coming because we also did not. And so I don't want that to impact me. I apologize, but I was trying to save us some time. But I was not a big fan.
I think it's okay. I don't know how anyone else likes to do this, but I've just got y'all side by side so that I can compare timing and this, but we'll move on. Thank you so much, Representative Gasaway, for running us through that. Let's go ahead and move on then to advocacy and outreach. And Dr. Reed, I'll turn this to you.
Sure. So, flexible work. So, given the nature of advocacy outreach, you don't know what might be thrown at us in here. I do know like a hallmark of the year with the change, about reimagining engagement and making sure that we are utilizing all the tools that they need to toolbox that are possible, and that we're not constantly defaulting to the same thing. I'll let you follow this possible to the panel, create some sort of like research guides, maybe operate something around, just, some research guides to refer to when you're like, feels like we've been using so take panels. Like, typically for panels live, so we start engagement after that. Let's think about what else we can use. So that's kind of like that's part of the pattern for that. The parent advocacy firm is really big out. But it's kind of trying to put a bow on this initiative that was started last term, where we want to engage families. I mean, it's part of also our bylaws related to. I think we're going to start with the ESSA family engagement standards, and we're going to that's what wrote one complaint that goes with that. But I would say realistically, the first two steps will probably happen, which are creating one, some sort of board level engagement for all families, and then two, hopefully recruiting families to do specific work on this kind of family engagement
But we're recognizing that we think that implementation standards might be a focus, but then when we get this council together, they might actually say, we're not really interested in that, but we like state implementation. So we're kind of trying to keep it open, so like being respectful of families' ideas and thoughts and beliefs. So hopefully we'll have more steps after we engage, first board level engagement, and then the first meeting of this year. We also too, I think this is the next step is that is in process, because I know you should provide a bunch of questions and some justice, and so making sure that this family engagement council is really complementary to the work that we're doing. So advocacy outreach, we don't want to just be like doing our own thing, it should be supporting initiatives of every committee, the board. And then basically working through circle. And then current advocacy, again, this is section now constantly get built out. I would like to start with sexual assault and reporting in schools, because that's the current thing that I'll provide more information on our committee meeting. But basically fleshing out steps of how do we go through, what should the board do, flesh it out, address that need. And again, these are things that are kind of happening on the fly. We follow work of advocacy outreach. You might see anything from Urban Liberty, mentioning, I think it was one time the vaccination, I can't remember, Lily sat and wrote a letter in one of our meetings on the fly. Or it's sometimes more engagement where it's not, we have, it's not it's time for the center came from state passage, and we had months to initiate for resolution. But basically, all I can say is there's going to be more steps that are going to be added and tracked start. And I'll see a couple seconds. We're out of time.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Are there clarifying questions for Dr. Reed?
Our committee is fluid. That's good work. We're always looking at what's going on in real time. So that's why Dr. Reed talking about. It doesn't sound like there's a speed. Or speed, what's going on in school. And how we rectify the problems.
Yes, so this may be a complete but when you start talking about family engagement standards, by the end of it, I realized I think you're talking about our that ESSA has a regulation related to how things should be engaged in school. And we went to look at not just for the ESSA discussion, but any school. There are standards that schools are held to engage with families, and we want to see like what is currently happening. Okay, so that actually does fit what I'm thinking about. Part of what I'm thinking about is, I mean, I've just been through a week and a half with, I know we all suffer from this, it's really awful engagement run by other agencies. And on one hand, I don't want to sort of say, well, we do everything great and let's just take down all the other agencies. But I feel like other agencies are really the ones that are setting the agenda for our city, and their ability to do engagement the way they do it is really and so maybe there's a way when we talk about these engagement standards to be able to think about them and talk about them as things for other this is what we expect for other agencies that are doing that. That actually might fit really well with this idea of that.
Our goal is to get different things in the one engagement board and figure out how we should do that. I'm not sure if it's effectively or something that's already going to happen with the board that are already doing that. And then two, get this council together. But they might come in and say that they don't even want to talk about it. They want to talk about something else. So I think we're going to be flexible to kind of hear them out first. Propose something. I don't know if they really like. I mean, that's kind of like the office engagement. Like whatever emerges from that convening is what we're going to allow them. We're going to support them to like so we pitched the family engagement because that is under our purpose for education related to it's under our purpose.
No, I guess what I was saying, I mean, I'm sure we'll try to make it, right, but more than that, I mean, I think it's gonna produce something called family engagement standards. That.
There's not just school focus, but more DC.
I actually love what I heard from Ruth, and I don't know if this is what you're saying of not to get too meta about it, but it's the best place to start is by asking families how they best engage together, right? To get their feedback on when, where, how, virtual, in person, how formal, how informal, what are the kinds of, what do we need to really make it as easy for them to engage as they can? And I think that would help set a pathway for us to be more of a either develop that process or others to learn from, right? And or create that level, right? But I think what we still don't know is what is preventing it? What is the barrier that's keeping other agencies from, in their good intentions of trying, well, some, mostly to try to engage constituents around their work? What is preventing folks from knowing about it, finding the time, accessing, understanding what they're talking about, feeling involved when they actually show up, right? And what can we learn from that for all of us?
Thank you. Well, initially I thought it wasn't. I thought it was a good idea, but wasn't. But maybe I'll check in with you to make sure we catch yours. We're asking for $2,000 for supplies and food. We're not very expensive money.
Thank you, Dr. Reed, and thank you, everyone, for good questions to clarify. Let's go on to board governance. Vice President Thompson.
All right. Board governance. Review of what we expect our work to be from now through our goal is to get our final recommendation report deliverable out to council in January. Why? Parts and projects have maximum amount of time to wrestle with recommendations. So we look at our plan. Everything built toward engagement around and learning feedback on getting draft recommendations and then getting final recommendations. Not a new idea. We do have some things built in as far as how to bring the board along. So, make it the following. One, governance is an issue that is covered in last. And so, for the last, two, we need to feel from either from experts. Three, it is important for us to show what we know. So typically, when you are in conversation with someone, you say that, hey, I think I heard this way, just this engagement between Representative Chen and Representative Martin versus the one. And she said, that's not exactly what I meant, but I thought that's what I needed. That is why we are delivering draft recommendations first. And then you see in phase 2, we are going to a second round of feedback because we want to make sure that our recommendations are representative to the best of our ability and capture as much feedback as many ideas as possible. We will then deliver final recommendations to the board to vote. I do want to highlight how we love feedback around not just how we see this having an ongoing conversation, how do we engage the maximum amount of people. Most of our requests for budget are around engagement. So money for survey, we're assuming that there are some efficiencies we have around collective engagement opportunities. We did provide kind of a high number. No could be zero. There's numbers are like going into meetings and doing presentations But all of our budget requests are around engagement of the public. Second, we get invite feedback around engagement of the board. So we have public spaces built in to this work plan, where we are saying, hey, board, here's what we learned, and here's what we need to know from you. So we made sure that built in, we bring our recommendations to a working session before we got to the board. We have a couple of panels that are presenting board and the public. And then we are also anticipating a separate check-in. We don't know if that's going to be a retreat or a working session. We're going to have to do throughout the year. Similar to what we did with engagements around the report cards, where we talked with the board about what percentage. I think it's important that every single member is prepared to weigh in. We want to make sure that our plan is thoughtful again with both engagement of the public and the members. Last thing I'll say is there is also built into here, once we get to a place of those final recommendations, some engagements with council. We think it's important actually to do a legislative briefing because spoiler alert, mayoral control, governance, the way we have it in DC is a local law. So we should probably talk to our legislators about what we have learned and are recommending for legislation, both to show what we know, but also to get any feedback around what's possible, because they are the ones who are crafting legislation in open spaces, and we give you some feedback. So those are my highlights from the work plan. I will ask if I missed anything as far as what the work is. Hearing none, I'll
Excellent. Let's go on to clarifying questions then. I have one. So in your work plan, you talked about some community meetings, and they're happening in 2 phases. And then in the budget, we've got ward level community engagements and citywide community engagements. Can you talk a little bit about how you're thinking about those?
Yeah, so we think of them as different. So one deliverable that we think to dedicate them for praises for the PowerPoint we put together for all engagement sessions. Staff will put together something that's a little more mobile and precise. So if members wanted to do a presentation at a OAC meeting, Civic Association or PTA, they have to work on. So we are thinking of those as community engagements, and then we are also thinking about what does it look like for the SBOE to do things like our fall engagements, which are longer, broader, citywide. We, that's how I say about this. So we think that it's specifically important because we know that some of the people who come to citywide engagements are going to be people who are very familiar with interacting with board. And there is an anticipation that we are in our framework as we think about potentially how we reach more people. We will have to take the show and work and go to where people are, because those are the people who are probably most impacted by changes to them. So that's why that's what we do. Thank you.
Clarifying questions?
Oh, and I should say, the community engagement site is a cost, it's for that. Because the cost being things, so it's not a meeting. Yes.
I'll start with a question for you, which is, I appreciate the clarity of the chronology. At the end of this year, when you say, the full board goes on recommendations, what is that look like? How big or small are the recommendations?
Yeah, so the last step in the work plan is recommendations go to council. So that is the audience, because again, our government, those are the people who have the power to make any changes or adjustments. That is the primary audience. do anticipate that we will identify secondary audiences and have some other steps that we think about how do we memorialize this work, how do we spread the word about what we would like to see and encourage. But that will come after we deliver the report and takes us further into 23. So this work plan only takes us to January.
Yes, okay, so this is partly related to what you were talking about, it's partly related to what advocacy was talking about, partly related to what Representative Chang said, which is this, in terms of engagement, and there's different kinds of engagement. I think part of what we're talking about is what are the right kinds, and we talk a lot about engagement. I'm going to raise two totally different things, and I don't know if they're like examples of what we can do with this, or things that advocacy is. And I think of what Representative Chang does with the laundromat. And just going and literally finding places and hanging out. That's other example, sort of how Red did around engagement with older storefront stations. They have a QR code and they went all over the place. You know, they went to libraries, they went to laundromats, other things. All questions, test surveys, engagement in a way. Now, I think it would be great to do some of that. And I think part of that is how you do it. That's why I want to propose it as a budget line. That this is something we should be doing. A survey or
I would make two things. One is that there is a survey built in to this. That's what we heard when we talked about our engagement before at the board level and coming back to say we should probably survey. Second, I forgot to say we actually do have built into our work plan. Representative Walker is that we are going to decide on some metrics up front for how many people we're trying to reach, who we're trying to reach, specific populations we're trying to reach, because if we are committed to equity, it's not enough for us to feel at any point, okay, we heard what we want to hear, so we're gonna stop engagement now, or we didn't hear what we want to hear, so we're gonna keep engagement going. We want to be very intentional and craft our tactics for engagement. To the committee has identified is a good sample size, but also in quality and reflective sample population. So we look forward to talking with the board about what that looks like, because I think that's a little bit different. Approach engagement to keep the work on track and to identify appropriate engagement.
Thank you for the good clarifying questions, and thank you, Vice President Thompson, for that thoughtful overview. On to education standards. Representative Jay, I give it to you.
Great, thank you. I will close out that last point and just say everyone here has a laundromat in your ward except Dr. Reed. Everyone. Oh, no, not the one on Alabama. That was also close. Hey, okay. So highly recommend sitting there and talking with folks for feedback. So education standards, we have 3 big goals this year. So the 3 buckets include getting a draft of a 5-year schedule for standards review. So developing a process for how we manage standards. Other states, some do 1 a year, but some states do, you know, every 10 years, every standard needs to be reevaluated. What is the most appropriate process for us is a big question that we would like to answer this year. On the literacy side, the goal for the end of the year is to develop an action plan that takes the comprehensive literacy plan and gives us a timeline, schedule, and some outcomes-based agreements and commitments from the various acronyms that work on literacy. And social studies, of course, is to vote on our recommended standards and how that process be fair, equitable, transparent, open, get feedback, and make sure that we get good social studies standards done. To get there, we are proposing also engagement resources. And not right now here it's written as sessions, engagement sessions ×3. I'd like to edit that to say not just events, but also things like surveys, educational videos to inform our constituents about questions that they might have. I love this idea of briefings, right, as well. And thinking about engagement, not only as a one-off mood, but rather as what is missing to keep the folks that we need and want to have involved in these 3 goals engaged in the work. We also want to, for the literacy work, propose having more of a robust set of research done around literacy. I have, and many of you have spoken, and many of our local community-based organizations have been prioritizing literacy work and gotten feedback from a lot of reading instructors, but a lot of that has been very ad hoc. Around, have you ever gotten literacy instructional training in your master's ed program? Informally, we think that's really, really lovely. That most of the reading instructors we've spoken to have never received formal training on how to teach them, right? And so thinking about, there are several open questions around how we can support our partners at Austin to move the literacy work forward. Is it what are the various trainings that are provided in various CCPS programs, schools, in various public charter schools? What are the different professional development programs for our instructors? What do our reading instructors think about those professional development programs right now? There's a long list of questions, and we'd love a chance to dig into that in partnership with Austin so that we can help with that, move that work forward. And that is how I see our timetable like our budget.
Clarifying questions?
So, my comment, I appreciate that, the work plan. With Austin, but I also am curious if there are things that really have to be be supportive of this, and maybe don't have to. It might make sense. Please think about
Yes, thank you. There will be a big ask for you coming up. So yes, thank you.
Be ready for it. Other clarifying questions?
Yes.
We have a lot of ideas for engagement, and I know the word is one area. I just wanted to are there any ones that we can like streamline or that's a factor right now. And so we have sessions, but I know we have $30,000 stuff that should be here, but also we probably have some who are not going for engagement standards as well as for consumer issues you have too. Yeah, are there any certain for streamlining or should we handle some of the other? That's the most but we needed to know okay.
It's right. My first reaction to that question, I think it's an efficiency question and it's a collaboration across communities question. So I hear it. Is even within the 3 goals that we have within the education standards committee, I think we're actually trying to engage 3 different. And so that makes it, I think, more difficult to imagine how we mesh it all into one, right? If one of our priorities for redesigning how we think about the process through which we update our standards is to get as much feedback from our students as possible. That's very different, I think, than getting feedback from our reading instructors about how their professional development has been going, right? And so I also love the idea of learning from one another and sharing best practices and building out collaboration across the committees. But I'd love to think about goal, audience, and be really, really deliberate about this vision.
Yeah, so on that, one of the things that we talked about, I think that the working is this idea, again, to go back to the teacher turnover. I mean, part of our challenge all the time is how can we be relevant? How can people start thinking about the board as a place to go, that the board has resources as part of the independent boards. Do something regular, and they really helps on that. So one thing we've done is this research report on teacher turnover. We've got other research. Another is regular survey. I mean, we're the voice. You need to know what people are saying. And at some point we talked about having sort of annual survey. Maybe 1 year it's some teachers, or 1 year it's some parents, or something like that. And then that could be really the focus. We knew we were going to do it. We knew we were going to start talking about it in April. We're going to put it down, or actually, I think over time, put it out in August or earlier, but that every year we have one. And it would be across these different issues for one of the constituents. And we took from it. So if it's teachers on literacy, then okay, maybe this is year you do a teacher one. That's one set of questions.
Other clarifying questions for Representative Chang about education standards? All right, thank you, Representative Chang. Teacher practice and school sports, Dr. O'Leary, floor is yours, sir.
Oh, great. You've got the paperwork in front of you. Really, as far as the budget is concerned, we're asking for another report from Mary, which would be something that we can use with our in-house information that we've had for the last 2.5 years. And that's our ask. What we're working on the committee has to do with teacher turnover, which unless I'm completely wrong with conversations that I have in the schools for the last 9 months or 8 months, there's going to be a tsunami of teacher turnover, the principal turnover from the summer. And hopefully we'll be able to get the information. As you know, we've been trying to get information from DCPS, from the charter schools, and from OSSI. They can help us understand where the teachers go, why they go, and that shouldn't be on the State Board of Education's docket, but it is. And so we want to keep the pressure on the system to make sure that we get the right information about that and we can work on it. Because we can't solve the problem if we don't know what the problem is. What we have been working on this year, and it's been very gratifying, I think, not only for the committee, but also for the people who participated in the discussions with us, with the EPP programs throughout the city, and also with mentorship. So those are going to be the focus, the foci of what we're going to be working on besides teacher retention, is because we don't have to spend any money for that. That was the good thing with our committee, is we had a lot of volunteers from the colleges and universities and from other places that could come and talk to us about programs that exist we found out in one of our committee meetings about programs that exist in BCPS and in Austin. And are really well hidden from everyone. So what we want to do is to open up dialogue so that we can get that information to the community. I'm going to stop right there. So we've only got that one ask for the very least report as far as money is concerned. We really are going to focus on mentorship, on the educator practice program, and also on getting prospective teachers in the college programs to know about these EPT programs. So I'll stop.
Thank you, Dr. O'Leary. Clarifying questions for Dr. O'Leary.
Thank you for reminding me that I had it on my notes, but I didn't mention. Okay, so the data warehouse plan is imperative for us, for the council to get active on it again, and for it to get passed, so that we can get real information from the city agencies rather than have the FOIA. And we don't even get it through FOIA. So that's very important. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. It's in my notes right here. And I also have one other thing in my notes that I forgot, and that's the impact program. We want to try to use American universities' report on the impact to try to find out where that is now. Hopefully it's going to be changing with the implementation of our STAR framework. And we want to know there's got to be something that's going to be evaluated for the system. So we want to know that. Thank you so much.
So the impact, I don't even go too far, but it would be great. Because at some point somebody's gonna try to look at that. I have no optimism that will be very soon, but I think getting people to start thinking about alternative ways to do evaluations that are really effective and useful. I mean, I think of my favorite is the peer review systems that you have in Montgomery County and some other places, but there's others as well. It'd be great to start hearing about them and try to get press on them, like have some of the experts come and talk to our meetings and try to generate some attention.
I think that would probably be outside of the teacher practice and school support committee. Education standards.
It's teacher evaluation. But different ways to do.
No, I see what you're saying. That's great. We haven't really talked about that part of it yet.
I know.
That's a great note. That's all right. We're fluid too. And that's something that's going to be on the burner at the end of the school year, that's for sure. And it's definitely something that teachers talk about all the time. It's not just teachers, educators, principals, and teachers. We're not satisfied with the impact.
Neither is person agree.
Other clarifying questions for Dr. O'Leary? Thank you, Dr. O'Leary. Before we move on to sort of open rounds of discussion, I want to make sure the Student Advisory Committee has any other budget requests that would be helpful. I will say, Mr. Hayward is always on the text with some data, and he noted out some rough estimates of costs that, depending on the number of shirts and buttons, etc., we're looking at a budget of maybe $3,500 up to size $10,000 or $15,000, depending on how many. So, any sense of how much one outfit the city is here?
So I'll keep an ask. So we don't, well, first on the work plan piece, we don't have a single annual work plan simply the advisory committee as an advisory committee that feels distinct from the way other committees operate. So that's why we don't have a specific work plan, as we mentioned, take on to this year first being the citywide survey, which has been published, and we decided to keep it open for as long as possible because, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the responses one school. Capital City really showed up. I'm really proud of them, but it's not very representative of the whole city. So we're keeping that open, but that obviously doesn't require any budgetary requests. And then, so as student representatives, we met about the vaccination initiative on Friday. So, and we didn't have everything finalized until about yesterday. We weren't able to come up with that budget request simply because we're not sure what everything looks like, because that includes t-shirts, buttons, pins, and if t-shirts are expensive, we have buttons and pins. And then also the cost to print flyers and brochures. So we don't have a specific budget request. So I think we can talk with state board staff about that. Yeah. And have something by the next public meeting. Thank you for that. Mr. Hayward, do you want to talk at all about the potential need for additional equipment to capture our beautiful voices better?
So members who have been on the board for a while know that we have been doing recordings and live streams of our meetings for many years. But pre-pandemic, we were doing that by holding an iPhone and using that video capability on an iPhone. And then we're slowly have been trying to figure out ways of doing that. Part of the challenge is, as some of you are probably noting, the Wi-Fi in this room is really bad. The building is really bad. And so with all of us on our computers, the bandwidth just goes down. And so it's really hard for us to find a device Wi-Fi capable. Also, we'll get all of the microphones that we need in this room and those things. So I've been, for years, been trying to find a solution that is cost effective, but also portable enough that we can store it in our offices and we'll get all of the things that we want, which are cameras that don't just sit at the end of a table, but might sit in the middle of the table and be able to rotate to see. There are systems like that, but they're costly. And so one of the things that I'm very grateful for all the comments that we used on Twitter tonight, as well as text messages to me personally about how some individuals are harder to hear than others. And so that's, I've been texting people during the meeting saying, hey, can you speak up a little bit of this? But one of the really fantastic suggestions that I did get during the meeting is that there's a potential for the office, the chief technology officer may have some technology they may be willing to work with us on. They're going to charge us for it. And so I'm working to see sort of what the charge is. It appears that there would be a charge per user per month to use this thing. If that's true, and it's say that we're one user and we're an agency, then we may be able to get it for somewhere between $500 a month, which would be a lot. We would end up being like $6,000 a year, which is over than what I think we would be willing to budget, frankly, for. We can buy one of the standalone units on our own for about $1,200 to $2,000. So that may be the way that we want to go. But that's all that we said. Like, if there is additional funding available in this year's budget, we can get back to the current beyond the current camera that we have, which is a lovely little device, but it doesn't really. The challenge is this room is big. We are a lot of people. Yeah. And so even the sidebar conversations get picked up on our microphones and all of those things too. So it's challenging when we're working through all of these situations to make sure that there's good quality audio and video for the public who are watching right now. So it's like, that's what we want. Right? We want to get to a place where it's almost the same quality as we're all at home with our Zoom. To be able to actually have the type of engagement, the equitable engagement that we're talking about for all of our So yes, I would ask for at least $2,000 so we can start experimenting, but that also, again, with the limited funds that we have available.
Clarifying questions for Mr. Hayward. We'll start with Dr. Leary, Vice Representative Blackburn.
Someone donate money to buy that,
There is a donation process that we would need to get approval for donation of that. Yes, it's essentially that. Individual donation is probably not the main one, not popular. Never received that type of thing before.
we haven't asked.
Well, one of the challenges is that sometimes it's looked on as a grant or somewhat a type of donation. So donations to government is a challenging thing. That's not more people. But I can investigate. Any other questions?
So I checked my text to see if you had texted me and said that I should talk about it, and you did not. But I did see a text saying from somebody saying they're on YouTube and they can't hear a thing. So there you go. Part of your.
And I think Vice President Thompson and I were just discussing that in the FY23 budget, we have been granted some money to begin to study taking our meetings on the road, or the mayor has put it in her request, and we have asked council to keep it in the budget, but that does not take effect till October.
And it's also largely for the public meetings.
Correct.
Rather than our work session. The devices and things may still work for that. Sure. But yeah.
So this is also something that is a time sensitive question of being able to keep up equitable public engagement while also having the opportunity to convene in person and take advantage of that. Okay. Are there any further clarifying questions for Mr. Hayward? Okay, so we are at roughly 7:30, and I want us to have some rounds of discussion to actually get into. We've heard from all of our committees an enormous amount of wonderful work to be done over the rest of the calendar year. We've heard a lot of financial requests that exceed the available budget. We've also heard, I think, really important distinctions and tensions about opportunities to combine funds for things like engagement sessions. I think there may, given what I've heard from folks, be some opportunities to combine some things we see here to say, sort of a play on what you were offering up, Representative Wattenberg, every year the state board does this. You were referring to a survey. I would love to say, it might also be nice to say every year the state board does a fall and a spring engagement where the public can count on coming to hear about the business of the board and engaging with us. And insofar as the items folks want to ask for might fit that, we could host the fall and the spring engagement with committees having a chance to engage the public at those sessions. But we also have some other specific things like opportunities to speak directly to literacy instructors, opportunities to speak directly to families. So with that, I want to throw 10 minutes up on the timer, and the floor is open to discuss as a board. This is our money, so it's not leadership's decision. It's the board's money to say, how should we approach decisions about how we spend our money?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you. I wanted to mention one thing that I forgot to mention, which was that the reason we have the and this whatever amount of money now to next year is because while these engagement sessions might take place after September, we don't know, and we also are doing the planning for them this summer. So that's what we asked for this year and not. Thank you.
All right, we'll start with Vice President Thompson.
Okay. I want to stay on the engagement sessions. Take a look at when people are proposing engagement in their work plans. I do think that it's important for us long term. Consistent spring and summer engagement groups. They should know the groups. Initially, and that will be a consistent heard that the public body is consistent. I am also curious that once I start to look across the work plans, if in lieu of people having planned for that fall spring delineation, if there are places where 2 or 3 committees are proposing engagements at similar time, or if there are places where there are flexibilities for these work plans and shift to get some of that, 3 committees or however many committees at the time. Like I said, I haven't done that yet, but I think that is one suggestion, stretching our funds. I do think that the fall engagement sessions that we recently did were strong. But I also think that one of the benefits to having more than one topic, and of course we got some feedback on how to do that better, so I would love to include feedback on how to do that better. But I think one of the benefits to having more than one topic at a time was exposure to multiple streams of work of the board at the same time. So maybe someone came to talk about the report cards, but they also got to engage on social studies, maybe not knowing something else. So I do see that is important, and I think that might be a path forward to get some of those efficiencies immediately as we move to the board.
Representative Chang next.
That's just what Mom said. I think there's a piece of that I don't. I want to make sure we're not doing redundancies, and it's the most effective way to do it, right? So I find that when I go to my ANC meetings representing a board member, half of my time is spent explaining who are we, what do we do, what are we allowed to do, what are our statutory functions, right? And clarifying everyone on the ANC call us school, right? And so there's the work that we go to other people's audiences that are already coming, who are not coming specifically for education, and use that as an educational opportunity to explain who we are and what we do. And I think my question around sort of needing our own special engagement is how much of that brings in audiences that don't come to our public meetings or sessions already. I don't know if we have that data. But to me, the added value of having those sessions, if it does not bring in new audiences, is more limited than it does. Right? And if we can find a way to design those in a way that reaches the folks who think of us as the school board, right? I think it's actually really helpful. And maybe if that's the goal, we go, it's more of all of us go to all of our ANC meetings, fall and spring, at least, right? And it's more of a commitment to go to the meetings that already exist. The idea of pairing up all the engagement I find interesting around the 2 variables that I think are the most important at the time, like you mentioned, an audience. And if there is a overlap in time and audience, I think we can mesh it into a similar kind of thing. I don't know how much big overlap there is that overlap, so it's hard for me to say what is more important. So
Come back to Vice President Thompson. Direct catching analysis.
So I agree with that. I've had that experience, right? I go to I think you have to do both. I think the question around who are we catching at our own engagements is also a responsibility on our part of how we understand that audience. But I think one of the real advantages around having our own sessions is making the amount of time of the and so I think we attend other people's meetings of the audience, but I do think the time to dive in and wrestle with is really important. I also, to your point earlier in the meeting about different audiences and different types of engagement, I also don't think something like what we did with the fall engagement catches all of the types of engagement we need to do. But I do think of it as a specific place for it.
Other thoughts, either on engagements or other aspects of how we take 100, well, let's call it 130,000 down to something more like 35.
Say for the all-around education study, it's on our fiscal year, but I feel like this is that I that's really not. That's the one that we do. And then on the other hand, I think for the parents, they need to around standards and say this is what happens. And so that one, I would have. Is there time sensitive?
Thank you for that, Representative. So I think that's a helpful framing, and I appreciate you offering that up as a way to frame. The teacher report. Yeah. Other thoughts, reactions to the work plan, budget requests, questions, adjustments on how we go forward and managing these numbers.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I think part of it was just that when we were discussing these within the community, we kind of put them in, so that it was a little bit more, okay, each of them max this much, so we can frame it within that. Too late to
It's a good question. So I'll say part of the reason we didn't do that is sort of twofold, that while every committee is important, every committee may have priority work in a given year that is more expensive and work that is less expensive in another year. So thinking about, the social studies work really dominated a lot of engagement time on staff during the 2020 year. Now we have important work to finish by voting, but it's less time intensive at the moment. So I think I'm hesitant to say, let's put an upper bound so that we can think about this equitably sharing, like, well, I'm not sure $35,000 split into 7, giving everyone 5,000 is helpful. If the teacher report costs 6, then we want to make sure to get that done.
Another part of this, one thing I remember being helpful last year was committees putting for so for the cost of things. So like when I was sharing about board governance, I said now help me take some of these committee meetings down as far as costs, because if we said that the way we are going to do that was as members go out and engage in our ANC, go out and get that's different.
Yeah.
And so I think some of the work that we can do as within our committees is to look and say where can we reduce the cost of what we're asking for, as opposed to just cutting the work completely and putting forth a high and a low band for some of the requests. Like I know that's possible for some of our
technical work.
Yeah, Dr. Leary.
Because I don't. What does this money do?
All of these funds must be expended by September.
I would think that this is probably come back. Not, cities and then come back. With the concept of what is that? When we talk about $125,000, $35,000. For me, that's like, well, I'm not buying a car this year. What is the number that we theoretically have? Top number? $5,000.
Yeah, 35.
Yeah, you're right. It's a fight that a youth role.
So I 100% agree, Dr. Leary. I'll say, I'm gonna be mindful, we sort of did our first 10-minute round. Here's what it sounds like I heard folks say. One is there are opportunities perhaps for efficiencies to be gained by looking at opportunities to combine some in-person engagements. That's one thing I heard. The second is at least one committee has agreed that the well-rounded education study, for instance, might be something that we can push to discuss in fiscal 23. So that brings our $125,000 budget down $32,000. Yay! We've already had number surgery. Another thing I heard is we could contemplate giving committees more guidance on whether it's a high-low value, how asking them how they can cut down numbers, or giving an upward bound number. If we want to do that, we're saying every committee is looking at a roughly $5,000 budget, knowing that some committees have less and others may ask for more. So for instance, Advocacy and Outreach has made a lower ask, so that's $3,000 more to play with. And then I heard from Dr. O'Leary that we also need some time to think about this, that we're not going to get to an answer tonight. Are there more things we think need to be aired tonight, or can we start to think about some assignments we might make to committees to go back and do?
So I thought that was a very good list. The one that was on the list was a survey that would combine issues from both places.
Got it. Okay, so another opportunity to combine is not just the in-person sessions, but also a larger survey that might touch on some of the other engagement pieces we talked about. Great, thank you for that, Representative Blackburn.
Also, I think that the moral stacks bucket for engaging would not be committee specific.
Right, so we have a board bucket for engagement that addressed interests and needs of both committees.
That's the end of my answer.
I mean, listen, I also like to budget in buckets, so I hear that 100%. Are there additional things folks want to raise or suggest or ask questions about? Otherwise, I'll make us a suggestion and see if folks approve. So I think it would be great to have committees go back and do two things. One, see if there are areas that you want to absolutely prioritize in FY22 and say this is the most important thing to us, and others you'd be willing to defer. See if there's a lower number. So you gave a number, for instance, for governance in the value of 24,000, but some of that can be reduced by thinking about how we show up for those things. And then we come back and have this discussion once more at the May meeting, but committees reach out and let us know where you landed in the interim. And then we can vote on that at the adoption in May. But know that we see things that committees are already working on, and so long as those things you're working on are cost neutral, have at it, go forward. Does that sound fair? Okay. That was easy. I want that was easy. Thank you all for engaging in this conversation, being willing to go for it. I think we have some really interesting ideas on the table. I am very excited about keep buttons. Love keep buttons. Dr. O'Leary is on us all about the purple, and we did not do a great job. Okay, so it is 7:44, and we're going to head into committee reports. We're going to give each committee 5 minutes. If you do not need the totality of your 5 minutes, that's fine. But we're going to go in the order that is listed on our agenda, which means we're going to start with our students.
Okay, so this month the SAC only met once and voted on what proposal we wanted to submit from the Aurora Institute portfolio. We ultimately decided on a proposal that highlights work done to uplift student advocacy and broadly the work of the SAC. We have also decided to keep the citywide survey open for longer.
I already given the commission before that. Huh? I don't have to do anything.
And not
Why didn't we have a meeting?
Ms. Carly Fisher joined us to talk about the DMP's recovery roadmap. We also went over final ideas for the youth vaccination initiative. Words that final details supporting today's meeting.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Any questions for our students? Thank you very much. Well done. Onward to accountability and assessments.
First of all, I will just say that we have a much broader work plan than I talked about. So I encourage you to look at it. There's a lot of cool stuff. And if I have time to get out, it's gonna be fine. But I did just want to note, well, one of the things on our that we do is kind of provide the board with the monthly update. Because the work of the resolution that ASCII is on now is important, right? Just our information. So we do want to make sure that the board is updated on our engagement around that and our stance on it. So I did just want to highlight, in case you didn't get a chance to read my very long email and then my very long follow-up response to Dr. Sutter's questions. Just some highlights, which is that at our last working session, Superintendent Grant noted that she was very pleased that there seems to be alignment between our agency around the process. And so in my update, or our update, we outlined some of the areas where we think we are not in alignment, and just that we're not sure. I think it's important for the board to notice the areas where the committee feels there are differences. And then I guess I've been in conversation to some extent with our leadership, and also love feedback from the rest of the board members on what you think about, what we should do with anything. Some of the areas are, well, first of all, we were just really hoping to have a much more collaborative process with ASCII, with the idea being that when we come to our July vote, that we are already on the same page, that we've been working closely, and it's not just an up or down vote, but that we know what we're getting, and we've been there. That's not good. That's the first thing. I think one of the most important areas, though, is that it's not clear from what we've heard, both through Ms. Johnson's presentation to the board and from the superintendent during the council decision, and now it's the first engagement session, that one of our recommendations is that we not have a summative rating or label or a rating for our schools. It seems like after saying yes, we are moving to start, it's not clear to us that they're going to at the engagement around, well, if we have a summative or a summative score, is what they're calling it, what will be done? And it just seems like that's a really important question that needs to be asked. It's not being asked. And there's a question of the timeline of who will get to vote on what's on the report card. It doesn't seem like it'll be the vote after. So, and there's a couple other minor center and so those are all. So there's several areas where we're not knowing. So now I think we'll be that's important, and we must expect make sure that we're all on the same page, at least in this case, the same page is that there is a villain. And actually my co-chair is here as well. Is there anything I missed? Is that that's two things. Okay, you can't hear. Any of my fellow committee members want to have to say? Yes.
Yeah, so I just, Representative Gessler is very polite and understated, and I just want to be very clear that what has happened in my government is this board spent a year putting together the research and engagement and the surveys and so on, and came up with a resolution that was unanimously adopted on one of the issues. Process where we would talk about I would say it's very clear that policies are not be different. They kind of publishes for and it's also clear that the engagement that's being done with at this point is extremely technical and not really asking people who are there their views on what it is they want to see schools rated on, not rated on, or what they want to see. So it was very difficult for people to say. So I just think it's an issue. And the timeline issue, to represent the Soy's point, it's not just who's going to get to vote on it, but we want to have climate measures on it. So we're by far the most popular, interesting. Everybody in every constituency wanted to see much more information about school climate. That is going to happen in 2023. It's got to start now. We need to develop the tool. We need to build up the so I feel like by not working on it now, basically being told it's not going to happen. Certainly not. So I just want to be there. And the last thing I want to say, which I think is where there are other initiatives that the board has worked on with Austin, there's been a direct communication between the staff of Superintendent Austin and the folks on the board that were directly working. So when I was president, we set it up so that Representative Sutter would work directly with Austin. And now Representative Sutter is setting it up so that there's a direct relationship with Representative Chang and Austin. This is the one place where it appears that there's not going to be such a relationship.
So I want to interrupt for a moment, Representative Watford. First, I'd like to make sure that Representative Patterson can speak. It sounds like this volume has come up, but I want to clarify before you do that. I have not made arrangements for Representative Chang to speak with Aussie. I want to be on the record about that because I heard, and I don't know whether it was intended, so I want to be clear that it may not have been intended that way, a suggestion that I have failed to create such a channel specifically for this issue, where I created a channel for another issue. And I do not.
I did not need to make a communication. And also it's my sense also that this may not come from you, but rather from Austin.
No, I appreciate that.
I think it's huge problem.
Okay, let me see if we can get Representative Patterson to have his chance to speak.
Okay, can I be heard? Can people hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I see your thumbs up, Representative Thompson, so thanks. So for me, as me and the co-chair has talked about, and we had a meeting as of yesterday, I apologize, I missed our committee meeting when we had it, but one of the biggest things that we talked about in trying to make sure going forward was that we just had time to reconcile between the June and July, July meeting, so that we just didn't have to just vote up or down. That was our biggest thing. And I want to emphasize to everyone, I understand that, we want as much collaboration as possible, but at the same time, we want to allow them to do their work and not seem like, and I've used this term numerous times, so my co-chair knows I use it, it's not poke the bear. and try to be antagonistic as they try to do their work at this current time, whether we agree with their process or not, but that we can have access to them once they have their recommendations. And we have time to reconcile how that goes with what we put forth in the recommendations. I'm very appreciative that on the 11th, that we have time with them to talk about at that particular time, some of the issues that have been raised. And I appreciate the president and the vice president allowing us to come into that meeting. So I think some of that can be happening then. And then when you look at the time schedule, so if we're in the April meeting, they're going to come to the May meeting, they're going to come to the June meeting. It seems like we're getting a lot of time to hear what they would like to say. We just want to make sure that there's some period to do some reconciliation between June and July. That's the major factor for me as co-chair, and I've expressed that to Representative Kasoy, so that we can just make sure that it's done in fidelity with what we try to do. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Representative Patterson. I want to offer one other thing that I shared with Representative Kasoy this afternoon. Then I'll see if there are any questions, and then we'll move on to the next meeting. One thing I have heard from OSSI in the presentation they did at the working session and in our conversations with Dr. Grant has been a committed effort to move away from the stars. I was absolutely clear that I listened in on the performance oversight hearing with my Councilmember Allen, pushed back, said, well, I hope you're not just going to replace them with apples or grades, because that's not moving away from the stars. Where I think we have yet to have a productive conversation with OSSI is around something Ms. Johnson raised at the March working session, which is in order to behave in fidelity with ESSA, we have to create a formula for identifying the lowest performing set of schools. And to do that, we have to run all schools in the city through that mathematical formula. Once we do that, we have a data set that ranks all of the schools on the formula. What do we do with that data? Do we present it somehow, or do we only share the bottom 5% and not share the rest of it? OSSI has said pretty clearly they don't feel it's appropriate to only share the bottom 5% and not the full set of rankings, because that information is available to the public through the Freedom of Information Act. So if we don't share it, someone, probably a journalist, will make a request, and then it will be shared without context provided by the state education agency with a vote by the state board. So I shared with Dr. Kasoy, I hope there's space to have a productive conversation with OSSI around, once they establish the new metrics and the formula that they will run all the schools through, what then do we do with that data? How do we categorize, present, name, sort, display those schools under ESSA? So not the report card, not all the other things, but how do we comply with ESSA in a way that we are transparent to the public about information while keeping the commitment to move away from the current summative rating? I don't know the answer to that. I really don't.
I just want to say, I hope there will be a chance for that conversation. We have a lot of responses to that. And I hope there'll be an opportunity to do that. And I just want people to be clear that a lot of us think that there we go. Because I don't want people to go forward with the line, yeah, that all is well. I mean, at the moment, I probably wouldn't vote for it, you know? So that's all I want.
But I don't think we have anything to vote for yet, right?
Well, I mean, based on the things, well, no, based on the things that are being said, that's what I'm saying. Obviously, I hope things will shape up in a different way. And I hope we'll do this conversation. I'm very hopeful about this conversation. I want to super clear about that.
Okay, let's take some time for questions. Representative Ernst, yes, already people.
That the conversation is very important, and I agree some what Representative Patterson is saying. The only thing that worries me is that if we wait too long and our 2 cells are already written, it might be harder to make revisions that we feel are necessary. Even if this isn't obviously there right now, which is slightly later, but not too far forward, and it's almost out of our hands. What that worries me is that if we wait too long, we won't be able to make some substantive changes that we may like to, because at a certain point, if a lot is written, I feel that it may be harder to make recommendations or changes to something that is more substantive. Whereas if we know know at least some intention for what a draft may include. We can have discussion over.
What happens if we vote no? So it just stays where it currently is, right? And so it's, I think where that leaves me though, then Representative Wentworth is. Then it's the same, right? Then we haven't accomplished the goal. And so, given that in the current state where we currently are, we don't have the statutory power to move this forward. What levers do you think we have to?
I would be happy to answer, but I think this is, we don't want a substantive debate here.
I mean, I encourage you to have that conversation,
Yeah, I
but
think
not
this is, yeah.
here.
Okay, but because I think that's where, to me, this is a tactical conversation. I don't think we, this too much of it. To me, it's a tactical conversation.
Do we yet again
What
get
is-
pulled into being a rubber stamp on it? We've already done this once. We get pulled into being a rubber stamp for policy.
And so that's what we're trying to.
Dr. Leary, did you want to say something?
No, I just-
Dr. Reed.
More of a comment, just to focus on what we propose in our resolution. And proposed recommendations for how I address that formula. So I want to make sure that we're still looking at the recommendations for what are the components of that formula, especially that was engaged. The components of the formula reflected in each that we had the things. And then I also don't show the ratings for. We show what is, I guess, a symbol for a variety of factors that did a school's work a certain type. So we don't show what's in the big school in the city. We don't show what schools are doing, what schools are doing. So I think that was something that I thought I may have heard in formula. But what we do, is our primary report effort, is that we have to show that so we technically don't have to show more than the 5%. Also going back to this remember center as one resolution, we're looking at something. I really want to ask you to focus in on our recommendation was 25% of schools, I believe, was something that we wanted to make sure that we provide support, but then just that whole framing of not just the rating, not just running the formulas, but how we really get schools to that I just want to kind of go back to the resolution to listen to my comments and thoughts on that.
I'm going to give Dr. Leary the final word and then move on to the committee reports. It's really not a conversation.
I, go have a meeting next week.
Yes, it's Monday.
Okay, I think that we should stick a pin in whatever we're thinking right now. On that, what happens. Like, saying, there's an urgency. No question, there's an urgency, right? But we don't know the information right now. Right? We gotta depend on our leadership, our board together, and make sure that the relationship between the board and us is working towards the same goal. And if we find out that it's not in that meeting, then that's a different conversation. But up until now, the promises that we've been given have been sort of positive promises as far as what the proof is going to be in the pudding next week.
Thank you, Dr. Leary. So I'll also just note that it is my understanding that on Monday's student advisory committee meeting, OSSI will also be engaging students. Okay, so we'll have two sort of proof points on Monday. We'll have the discussion with leadership and then whatever that engagement looks like.
And as of right now, it's not going to just be press meetings. Also, it's going to be both SAC meetings for the company. That's part of half of the meetings.
Okay, just so I know it wasn't the yesterday, so that's.
Yeah. I know that was a little smaller, so I'm hoping that the student advisory committee is able to get the first point. Thank you all for the substantive engagement. I do think this is an important thing to spend time on, but ongoing. Let us move on next to advocacy and outreach. Dr. Reed.
Yeah. So, however, there is an issue that the board was given over. Sorry. Are you good? Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I skipped Vice President Thompson.
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So we didn't meet, but there is an issue with reporting of sexual assault. And I think that's the umbrella thing about it. And I know it came up within Ward 2, there is something for Ward 8. I think the common thing is delayed reporting, but it's no center. So 2 parts. One, I want to make sure the board and our impact our leadership team are like, what can the board do? The initial step proposed to make sure we are all trained as mandated reporters. Usually schools get trained like once a year on it. But making sure we know if the issues come to us, that we know how to respond to it according to these. Often, don't know, it's like report to CSA. So we don't lose some precious time on that. So they sent us an email, and I know there's a link for that, but we're going to put out our steps about like what to do, what should be action so that students, aren't being solicited regardless of whatever that is. I also, it could be also make sure other elected officials are also trained in making reporting because we handle very delicate issues and have sometimes folks on the addition of strong relationships with children and not. So more information about that after the working on that. What are we on the same page with to one being a support possible
Thank you, Dr. Reed. It's actually well timed then. I'm going to come to Vice President Thompson, who I skipped on the admin committee. My apologies. But one of the things discussed by the admin committee was this topic.
All right, so I would like to maybe take my minutes. All right, so I'm gonna do admin first and then that, so admin committee, first thing we talked about was what we heard over. We also followed up with DDS about ongoing space requests budget resource issue. As of right now, DDS has not been able to identify any space that meets our needs within the inventory. They did suggest a commercial rental. So we're not too thrilled about the cost of that, not because it's unreasonable for the square footage per space, but because we think there's places we can go, including maybe, I don't know, schools. So that would be awesome. We are following up, having follow-up conversations with Councilmember White, Barbara White, who has oversight of DGS, and that conversation is scheduled. We also will reiterate this in our ongoing with the chair. We and Serena and Dan, our city advocate, have been in conversations with the one outstanding budget resource request. Next, mandated reporter policy. Did bring up Dr. Lee's recommendation that all SBOE pass mandated reporter training. I know they have been through training as an NCS employee. It's not comprehensive, so we do think it was helpful in the basics. Serena made a great note that this actually does not change our status as mandated report. We do want to have some ongoing conversation with the board around what it what work looks like internally for us, what some work looks like externally around sexual assault in the school. We are going to follow up with evidence outreach around this. One of the things we bring to the board is what would be helpful to meeting our goals, not just improving reporting, but reducing sexual assaults. And we cannot require you all. So right now, we make suggestions. So we share the suggestion. We will be following up also with OHG because there are some implications around some of the requirements. Make sure that we're not. Moving on, for work plans, we noted that we had our meeting on the day work plans were to be submitted. So we were not able to review the work plans in our meeting, but we did talk about some of the priorities of the board. We're looking to see them in the work plans. Share some of the on the page. The A&A committee's priorities, their budget, presidents that are also asked about some of the practices, how we would anticipate having this conversation today, which I think that's two things. We make the change that we now want students to go first. They have noted that it is confusing to them when we start switching around the words. And we like that. And we value them. So we're just gonna make the change. Students vote first. We like them, so let's do it. Equity audit. We discussed the need to submit a budget request audit tools to make sure we have support and getting the office of the ombudsman to have to make sure they get some kind of updates outside of. So I was impressed with the meeting and that for so I will make sure that the outpatient systems.
So we're not.
No, we're not.
Why is it?
We don't want to. Statute or specific job titles.
And Serena, Serena also, I would say that Serena, our was particularly helpful in the conversation. She noted that exactly what Director Hayward just said about our status as a mandated reporter. She also noted that while taking the training is helpful, it does not, just because you take the training does not change your status. Right. So we're not able to. No, we're not. Okay. So I guess because we get a lot of actually about this thing started at this, but this is general. Get like emails from okay, which was it second studies or like possible like then obviously from a commissioner where they reached out to me first about something they heard about the school. I was like, oh, we contacted them to say first. I'm glad you take it to me, but like, and actually I went ahead and did it because I didn't trust email and then there was a change situation, and then the first school was one of mine. So I want to think about like what solutions within the confines. I know we're not making orders, but making sure that we are handling things that are appropriately. Setting a standard also for like other, I think, make sure that they know because they might get information first. And then if you're not getting reports, that means they're not. So that makes like, yeah. So I'm kind of like, I think that that's that's the statute, but also the law off the board. When they're if you don't work, how can they work? You also follow how to set a standard we are. And sometimes we have to. Oh. Yeah, I mean, so I think one of the things that I hope to say, we are encouraging everyone to say. There are one that does not change our status, and there would be other implications to changing our status. At the same time, one of the reasons for our Sherrod purpose. When I worked for DC Public Schools, I was kind of like a Sherrod. So I was someone that people call because they had all types of issues, everything from my kid got sick today and I don't know why, to somebody broke in my house, so everything. And my kids didn't want to be out of my freezer, so what do I do? I so trust that I heard some sensitive issues, but I was not a mandated reporter. The reason I was asked to take the mandated reporter training was to make sure someone like me, instead of saying, I don't know what to do with that, knows who is a mandated reporter and who to follow up, which is why we think it's helpful for board members. And working with the bus office, OAG, we will be following up with also advocacy and outreach to talk about how we can be expansive and responsive in what we know and how we can. So thank you for raising it, and it seems to be a lot of different implications that we told you to. All right, so we had our meeting earlier this month, the part team had virtual meeting attended by myself, Representative Chancellor, Representative Butler, and thank you always about flash staffing us. We focused our meeting on the work plan and budget priorities. Few highlights. So I shared that we now have a 2022 for government SharePoint folder thanks to Darren. We will include all of our committee materials there, including previous slides and updates and the work plan. In addition to things like the slides being developed, the checkpoint moving forward, all of the board members are welcome to access those materials. It's helpful. So again, thank you, Darren, for putting those in place for us. Representative Blackburn made a suggestion to build into the work plan section of like a list of the experts that we will be engaging, so we expand the number of meetings we're having around engagements and experts. Representative Patterson noted the assessment accountability committee surveys, that help lead to policy recommendations. That was something on our plan. And then we as a committee also discussed the strengths and drawbacks of sharing recommendations during things like election campaigns, and ultimately agreed to finalizing sharing recommendations by January of 2023. Representative Whiteberg noted that by January, the committee would have closed the surveys about the anyway, we would have closed the surveys, developed the recommendations, and help community engagement. A couple other suggestions. We talked about holding engagement sessions with the board. I'm trying to take over the thing. We also talked about some of the budget. We can see where budget. I'm happy to take.
All right, Tina, thank you, Vice President.
Well, I would just quickly say, I noted, and just sharing it publicly, that I worry that we don't have enough wiggle room in the schedule, given that the time between our final vote and when board members will fall off the board. And as we often know, things come up, we have to revise schedules. And so just putting that out there, it is my understanding that there was an attempt to work things out or try and move things around, but it wasn't possible. But this just leaves us no wiggle room, and there might be a chance where a new board that doesn't have sufficient context may be dealing with recommendations should something happen at the end of the year.
No, I think that's in reference to trying to have the initial planning for the initial vote in November.
Yes, that's exactly what I was response. So that is not reflected here because it was part of the meeting.
No, I'm just saying for people to consider.
Right, right. So that was not reflected here because it wasn't part of the meeting. I will say that Darren and I did our best, not just to consider that request, but also to build a buffer to our work time. And so we're saying that the latest we would have is December, but there was tension between how are we true to the engagement we need to do in recognizing that it is April now and moving it forward up. And so the decision was to, in order to accommodate and incorporate all the requests that people made around how we did engagement, to build in buffer around within the work plan for weeks and keep it as a December vote. We also were very intentional about building in checkpoints with the board so that the board members didn't feel blindsided by what we were. One of the things that I think some members have experienced is we are not on the committee, given that we all have different commitments and time constraints, and you're probably not going back to watching the election. So you probably don't get to go to all the engagements. And so in order to accommodate not saying, all right, you probably need to be exposed to this again, we chose to build in times to do that with the board to address some of the concerns that were raised about November. So we could get to a place where people are ready to vote in November because we have buffer built in, but we didn't want to not build in the buffer time and then push the vote back.
My concern is less about the board, and it's more so if something comes up through the community engagement. And let's say our plan blows up because the community says, we don't want this, or I don't know, or something from the external, OSCE comes with something, and now there's a pressing, urgent moment for ESSA. That was more of my concern, the inevitable things that are out of our control, less like whether or not board members.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'll suggest that we come back and keep this conversation going so we can move on. It is 8:22. I'm mindful that our student members are here for a long time now. So we have 2 more committees to hear from, and then we're going to go into new business. But if student members do need to leave, I want to make it explicit it is okay. And we'll do our best to adjourn, let's say by 8:04. Okay, so we're gonna work as fast as we can. Thank you very much, Vice President Thompson. Moving on to education standards.
Great, I'll be quick. But first, love Representative Whitberg made a sign when she said what go with different schools.
It says great idea. We might just need a great idea sign. I like this plan.
Really quick overview of our committee work. It's also a tactical conversation that we're having now of how to work positively. And I think that's where we're juggling several balls in the community, several of which are in the Austin courts. And so that's where we're going.
All right. Thank you very much. Questions for Representative Chang? Okay, teacher practice and school support, Dr. O'Leary.
Already gave mine.
All right, thank you very much. External committees, any reports from our external committees? Partnership?
Sure. Had the second meeting, working on bylaws and divided us into groups. And according to research items that was had to work sessions. So there's like there's also a survey. I didn't survey that survey. On what research items people have and their research ideas. Pipeline for Yes. It's, you know, we'll see what they're doing.
Dr. Reed's gonna send survey questions for Dr. Reed. Other external committees.
Like, that's a question.
Go ahead. Representative Chang.
You want to say anything about the new timeline?
If I had anything to say, I would say it. I will tell you, I am anxious and frustrated by moving timelines, but I don't have any new updates. Please know that it is one of the topics for Monday's meeting with the state superintendent. I did send an email noting some concerns that I have about where we are in the timeline and what that means for public engagement. And I will share that one thing I'm hoping that we can arrive at when we hear back from the superintendent is adequate time for our board to be involved in that engagement, both in spreading the word about the survey, but also in having ample opportunities for members of the public to come to speak to us about their responses to the standards. Meaning that.
And for us to hear from the experts.
Yes, yes. I have also emphatically noted that we have some really fabulous people coming to speak to us on April 20th. We would really like to have the standards to them with plenty of time for them to review it. So as soon as I have more, I will share it. I am just in the dark as well. Other external committee updates. Great. New business.
On not this Thursday, the next Thursday, 14th, I believe the office of the student having a leader summit, the EC Student Leader Summit, where they'll talk about accountability, burnout prevention, identity, organizing and advocacy, and we are representatives are sitting on helping facilitate discussions in one of those rooms. So if it's not, or if it hasn't already been in your inbox, and in case it has, I'll send it out, I'll forward it again, just so everyone can see it. And we really appreciate people sharing it around. It's a great opportunity. It's over spring break for most people. It's 2 hours from 12 to 2 p.m. So I'll share it out later, re-forward it, but I just wanted everyone to have it.
Thank you so much. Other new business. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion. Is there a second? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay.
Aye.
Thank you very much to everyone. The ayes have it.